Chapter 1045. To Emperor Dong's Palace. Hearing this, all the experts of the Wang family of Beihai turned their heads at the same time and looked at Wang Xianxia. Everyone's eyes were a little complicated. At this time, as the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, Wang Xianxia was absolutely not welcome to Emperor Dong's palace. In addition to the foreseeable interests, the main reason why Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace could cooperate was the attitude of Xianxia state. To be exact, it was the attitude that Xianxia state wanted to uproot Beihai. This tough attitude not only made the Wang family of Beihai uneasy, but also Emperor Dong's palace uneasy. The two forces took almost the same development route. Xianxia state could treat Beihai like this when Beihai was weak, so it could naturally deal with Tiannan when Emperor Dong was weak. Emperor Dong's palace had to express its support for the Wang family of Beihai. If Emperor Dong's palace was about to be destroyed, the Wang family of Beihai would undoubtedly find a way to protect Emperor Dong's palace, even if it was only in name. The two sides were undoubtedly opponents, but when facing Xianxia state, they could be each other's shields. Xianxia state also worried about this, so they united with Wang Qinglei. Through Wang Qinglei, they contacted Jiang Shangyu, who pretended to be mysterious at that time, and then set up a joint force, intending to use external forces to destroy the Wang family of Beihai. At the same time, they hinted to Emperor Dong's palace to take a step back. However, a series of things that happened later were completely out of their control, so Li Tianlan came to Mount Dibing in person. Li Tianlan ended the final battle of Beihai. After the final battle, Wang Xianxia set off the chaos of the Dark World. Everything was over. Everything had just begun. Under such circumstances, the cooperation between the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace had officially ended. No one could tell the relationship between Li Tianlan and Beihai. Enemy? Opponent? No matter what, in short, they would no longer be friends, nor would they be allies. What was Wang Xianxia going to Tiannan at this time? Courtesy demanded reciprocity. The use of this word was quite meaningful. But no one thought that Wang Xianxia meant to express his gratitude to Li Tianlan for helping Beihai. At this time, this sentence seemed to be referring to Li Tianlan sweeping across Beihai more than 2 years ago. Punishment raised his eyebrows. An incomparably fierce battle intent flashed across his somewhat aged face, and then he fell silent again. Young master, now? Punishment's tone was tentative. The strength that Wang Xianxia had just shown was completely incredible. No, it couldn't even be described as strength. It was a strength that completely exceeded everyone's imagination. 2.5 hours of fighting. Countless Wang Xianxiaos had completely filled the city. He alone had transformed into an army of hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands. At least a few 100,000. Hundreds of thousands of sword chi clones ignored everything, and all of them were in the fire-flaming realm. This strength was not strong. The sword chi doppelgangers were not even at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. Each of them looked like elites who had exhausted their potential and barely entered the fire-flaming realm. With such strength, if it was just an individual, they were not even as good as some experts at the peak of the ice-condensing realm with excellent potential. But the problem was that there were too many of them. The majestic sword chi swept through the entire city, turning into clones of sword chi one after another. At that moment, Wang Xianxia was everywhere and omnipotent. All the people of the united forces fell down one by one, and the whole army was wiped out. No one survived. No one knew why Wang Xianxia had suddenly become so powerful. For Beihai, it didn't matter. What mattered was, who was stronger between Wang Xianxia and Li Tianlan now? Comparing Wang Xianxia to Li Tianlan, for more than 2 years, no one in Beihai had even thought about this question. But now, recalling the scene just now, everyone's hearts suddenly became incomparably excited. No one in Beihai knew exactly how strong Li Tianlan was. The number one expert in the Dark World was just a pure and even a vague concept. Did Wang Xianxia have the strength to rival Li Tianlan now? I feel good now. Wang Xianxia smiled. He was now full of energy, qi, and spirit, and the sword energy coat on him was still growing. After more than 2 hours of fighting and thousands of deaths, he was not even stained with blood at this time. This feeling was extremely wonderful. In such a battle, everyone in the united forces was like a real nonentity. The endless sword energy flowing around him reminded him every minute and second. This feeling was the feeling of standing at the peak of this era. Everything about fighting and the dark world, this sword energy could give him whatever he wanted. Don't be nervous. Wang Xianxia glanced at Discipline and said softly, I'm just going to Emperor Dong's palace to get something. There's no need to have a conflict with them. What is it? Discipline's tone was a little hesitant and tentative. Xianyuan Feng. Wang Xingxiao's voice was calm and firm. Ruthless without energy was Xianyuan Feng. Everyone's body trembled slightly. I'll go with young master. Discipline didn't stop Wang Xingxiao, but made his attitude clear without hesitation. Count me in. Firmament's voice was hoarse. Count me in. The enchantress, covered in blood, also came out. More and more people came out and surrounded Wang Xiangxiao, their attitudes extremely firm. Fit. Wang Xiangxiao said quietly. He was silent for a second and continued, There's no need. Yes, there was no need. Wang Xingxiao didn't think there would be any fighting when he went to get Ruthless this time. Ruthless had no energy. As Xianyuan Feng, his will was at the lowest point and there was no room for resistance. As for Li Tunlin, Wang Xiangxiao thought of the lifeless desert near Mount Dibing. He was sure that Li Tianlan had encountered some extremely strong threats after leaving Mount Dibing. He didn't know what happened to the desert. The only speculation was that Li Tianlan had used the dragon vein to drain the nearby vitality. What else could he do with such a large sum of money except for healing? Li Tianlan was very likely to be in a state of serious injury now. No one in the entire Emperor Dong's palace could pose a threat to him. He was determined to get Xianyuan Feng. His current state was extremely special. The sword energy coat on his body was indeed improving his realm and transforming his body all the time. But his strength came from the energy of Wang Tianzong's sword Qi doppelganger and Worryless. As long as Wang Xingxiao didn't squander his power all the time, this state could indeed last for a long time. 3 years, 5 years, maybe longer. But this was not a permanent solution after all. He wasn't sure how long he could be strong, and he wasn't sure when Wang Tianzong could recover. The only way was to get a new way to deter the dark world before the sword energy of Worryless and the sword Qi doppelganger was used up. Xianyuan Feng was undoubtedly the most suitable choice. Xianyuan Feng and Worryless were originally a combination of murderous weapons, which meant that there was no obstacle to the integration of the two. Worryless was a pure energy core. With Ruthless as a carrier, its energy cycle would be infinitely accelerated. At that time, the speed of Xianyuan Feng's energy replenishment would be several times higher. A Xianyuan Feng that was full of energy and could be used many times was enough to ensure that the Wang family of Beihai would be truly invincible for decades to come. If Wang Xiangxiao held Xianyuan Feng in his current state, he would be the heavenly son of this era. Wang Xingxiao didn't consider whether it was unfair to Emperor Dong's palace. They were not friends. Li Tianlan was seriously injured, and Emperor Dong's palace was weak. This was what he should consider. Because Li Tianlan helped the Wang family of Beihai, Wang Xingxiao would protect the entire Emperor Dong's palace when Li Tianlan was seriously injured. Xianyuan Feng? In his view, this was just interest. Maybe the interest was a little high, but Emperor Dong's palace didn't have the right to choose. Wang Xingxiao didn't care about taking advantage of the situation. His purpose was so pure and clear. Get Xianyuan Feng. At all costs. Li Tianlan is in a very bad state now. It's very likely that he's seriously injured. It's unlikely that he'll make a move. Wang Xingxiao's voice was calm and confident, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Even if he's unharmed, he may not be a match for me now. Chapter 1046. The wind and snow had stopped, and the streets were flowing. As the city least affected by the decisive battle, after the tragic night, Xingzhou acted as if nothing had happened. The people coming and going were calm and leisurely, without any panic. What happened last night could be said to be a really trivial matter for Xingzhou. The small elite of the joint forces did not make any waves in Xingzhou at all. In different positions, the battle ended completely more than 10 minutes after it started. All the assassination plans to cause chaos had failed. This had something to do with the fact that this was the capital of Beihai, close to Mount Dibing. It also had something to do with the urban structure of Shenzhou. No vehicles could be seen on the ground of Shenzhou. Not even one. All the roads in the whole city were sidewalks. There were no traffic lights or overpasses. Private cars, buses, and even battery-powered cars and bicycles in Shenzhou used the underground traffic network. The sidewalks on the ground of the whole Shenzhou were accessible in all directions. The planning of the whole Shenzhou was like a huge park, lush and green, without the slightest noise of vehicles. Such urban planning was extremely difficult to cause chaos. A city's war alarm could clear the ground in the shortest time. In a favorable situation, the Beihai Corps could also take the initiative to attack. Chaos? The chaos was completely over before it started. Jiang Shangyu stood quietly in front of the window, silently looking at the lush Shenzhou city outside the window. His eyes were a little absent-minded, as if he was thinking about something. In 12 hours at most, the investigation of Mount Dibing will appear here. If we don't leave in time, the consequences will be unimaginable. Li Guangtu, whose breath had been extremely weak, sat on the sofa and said in a weak voice. They were now in a very ordinary 3-star hotel in Shenzhou City. After escaping from the dense forest, Jiang Shangyu took him and Moraid, who was in a coma, directly to this place. Jiang Shangyu had obviously prepared a way out. This room was a long-term private room opened with someone else's ID card. No matter how they checked, the owner of the ID card would not have anything to do with Jiang Shangyu. This was undoubtedly the first place to stay. Since Jiang Shangyu could prepare here, he obviously had a clear plan for leaving Beihai. The moment they entered the hotel, Li Guangtu really confirmed that Jiang Shangyu had actually made preparations for failure even though he had a great advantage. This is something that Beihai can do. They also have the strength to do so. Jiang Shangyu came to his senses and shook his head. But I know that compared with the investigation that will happen soon, the seemingly peaceful Shenzhou is the real dragnet. As long as we leave the hotel, we will be tracked by Mount Dibing in less than half an hour. At that time, Jiang Shangyu shrugged and didn't go on to say it. It's impossible for me to recover within 12 hours. Li Guangtu's voice was low and weak. He was seriously injured this time. Facing Li Tianlan and Wu You, the overwhelming sword qi accumulated serious injuries again and again. It was extremely difficult for him to sneak attack Li Tianlan in the dense forest. That sword strike had drained all his strength, and his internal organs were in a state of serious overdraft. 12 hours. Even if the time was doubled, Li Guangtu could not recover his combat capability. Any kind of combat power. The current Li Guangtu was not even comparable to an ordinary person. He was truly powerless. He believed that Jiang Shangyu, who seemed to be in a much better condition than him, was the same. If he still had any combat capability, his domain could cover the three of them and they could leave Beihai without being noticed. Now there were no masters in Beihai who could fight. Those Thundershocking Realm and Half-Step Invincible Realm experts could walk in front of them without being noticed under Jiang Shangyu's domain. If Jiang Shangyu could do this, there was no need for him to come to this hotel. This was also why Li Guangtu felt that Jiang Shangyu was thoughtful. This hotel and this room looked ordinary, but it meant that Jiang Shangyu had already prepared for the worst. He was not only thinking about failure, but also what to do when he had no combat capability. Me too. Jiang Shangyu smiled. But it doesn't matter. We are in a much better situation now that we can leave Mount Dibing and that dense forest. What's your plan? Li Guangtu looked at him quietly. Jiang Shangyu looked up at his watch and said slowly, "Wait a little longer. Someone will come to pick us up. We will soon leave Shenzhou and then Beihai." Li Guangtu fell silent and did not speak. The room was quiet again. Li Guangtu and Jiang Shangyu were silent. Moraid lay quietly on the bed, not making a sound. The atmosphere was depressing and boring. "Say," Li Guangtu suddenly said, "is Li Tianlan dead?" "I don't know." Jiang Shangyu thought for a moment and said with some uncertainty, "But he should not be dead." but I can't think of a reason why he can survive. At the moment of the attack, Li Tianlan did not see Jiang Shangyu and Li Kuangtu, so the imitation sword could only be shot in the direction of the attack. But both of them saw Li Tianlan's state at that time. To say the least, even if the two of them did not observe clearly enough, the power of the sword was enough to explain the situation. Li Kuangtu's eyes were a little cold and he sighed. He shook his head. That sword, with a little fear and uncertainty, he whispered, "How did he do it?" "I don't know." Jiang Shangyu shook his head again. "But the power of that sword is almost infinitely close to the eternal sword above Mormons at that time. With Li Tianlan's current physical strength, his end is almost doomed after that sword. But I don't know why. I always feel that he is not dead." "Intuition?" Li Kuangtu asked. "That's too mysterious." Jiang Shangyu shook his head. "I don't believe in this. I can't tell the answer. It's a little vague. But the more I think about it, the more I feel that he will not die. And I don't know if you have noticed anything." Jiang Shangyu quietly looked out of the window at Xingzhou. The sun was shining, the wind was blowing, the treetops were shaking, the flowers were swaying, and the water was clear. It was still the familiar world, incomparably beautiful, and it seemed unchanged. Jiang Shangyu shook his head slightly. "The world in front of us. It seems that something we haven't noticed has changed. Or, it's something we can't notice," Jiang Shangyu said softly and slowly turned around. Li Kuangtu's eyes were fixed on him. At the moment when Jiang Shangyu turned around, in a trance, Li Kuangtu seemed to see a touch of incomparably mournful blood-red flash on Jiang Shangyu's body. Chapter 1047. What is that? Li Kuangtu's eyes changed, and he was a little confused. He looked at Jiang Shangyu carefully, only to find that everything about Jiang Shangyu had become normal, as if the blood-red color just now was just an illusion. But Li Kuangtu couldn't help but feel a little panic in his heart. He couldn't tell why he had such a feeling. The scarlet color that disappeared after a hurried glance was so mournful, and could even be said to be ferocious. It instinctively gave people a very uneasy feeling. Jiang Shangyu slowly walked to the sofa and sat down. His movements were very, very slow. "Are you okay?" Li Kuangtu took the initiative to ask. "What can happen to me?" Jiang Shangyu looked at Li Kuangtu in surprise and asked. "Well," Li Kuangtu looked at him thoughtfully and didn't speak. The uneasiness in his heart grew stronger and stronger, and it became stronger in the somewhat depressing hotel room. Jiang Shangyu sat on the sofa, leaning against the back of the chair with his body extremely stiff. He was quiet, silent, and motionless. He didn't move at all. Li Kuangtu looked at him quietly. Jiang Shangyu, who was in this position, gave off an indescribable feeling of strangeness. The room was getting quieter and quieter, and the atmosphere was constantly depressing. Jiang Shangyu just sat there. He looked very ordinary, but the more he looked at him, the more uncomfortable he felt. "What's wrong?" Li Kuangtu frowned and thought. Jiang Shangyu, who was motionless, seemed to be thinking too. A fine layer of cold sweat came out of Li Kuangtu's body. He had never been a timid person, but in this seemingly ordinary environment, he felt that it was getting more and more terrifying. It was as if he was having a nightmare. There was clearly nothing in the nightmare, and everything was very ordinary, but the great fear would always wake him up unconsciously. The room became quieter and quieter. It was so quiet that there was not even the sound of breathing. Breathing? Not even the sound of breathing? Li Kuangtu suddenly raised his head and stared at Jiang Shangyu, who was sitting in an extremely strange posture. He finally knew what was wrong. Jiang Shangyu sat motionless. This feeling, it was as if he had placed a dead man on the sofa and had carefully arranged the posture for him. Without warning, Li Kuangtu's scalp went numb. The room seemed to be getting quieter and quieter, and the rapid heartbeat became clearer. Li Kuangtu's breathing was a little disordered. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say. "What's wrong?" Jiang Shangyu, who had been silent as if he had been dead for a long time, slowly turned his head. He had only sat down for a few minutes, but it felt like he had been sitting for a long time. As he turned his head, his neck made a clear sound of bones rubbing against each other. "I'm fine." Li Kuangtu tried his best to remain calm, but his heart kept sinking. As Jiang Shangyu turned around, he saw Jiang Shangyu's face. That originally somewhat pale face now had an extremely distinct greenish-gray color. It was the greenish-gray color of a corpse that had been dead for a long time. In this state, Jiang Shangyu was really like a dead man. Jiang Shangyu did not respond. But he did not turn his head. His eyes were wide open, staring at Li Kuangtu. He didn't speak, nor did he move. He just looked at Li Kuangtu quietly. Like a corpse turning its head, everything froze once again. Li Kuangtu's whole body was covered by Jiang Shangyu's sight. He didn't speak or move. The bedroom was so quiet that it made people's hair stand on end. Today, this day, is really a heavy loss. Jiang Shangyu suddenly spoke. His head slowly turned around, his body stiffened against the chair, and he muttered to himself. His breath was calm. His tone was really calm. It was calm without any ups and downs, and even sounded extremely stiff and numb. Li Kuangtu breathed a sigh of relief. The cold sweat had soaked his clothes, and the sweat seeped into the wound. It was a little painful. He moved his body unnaturally and said in a dry voice, "The joint forces." He shook his head slightly. At this time, he was not in the mood to think about the future. His eyes had been locked on Jiang Shangyu intentionally or unintentionally. He didn't know why, but he didn't want to stay with Jiang Shangyu like this for a second. Or he didn't want to stay in this room for a second. Think about yourself first. Jiang Shangyu continued to speak in that calm tone without any ups and downs. Think about the purgatory of heaven capital. Li Kuangtu was stunned. All the ups and downs in his mind were pulled back in an instant. The purgatory of heaven capital. That was his everything. It was undoubtedly Li Kuangtu's weakness. We appeared in Mount Dibing this time, and we even joined hands to sneak attack Li Tianlan just now, Jiang Shangyu said. If Li Tianlan didn't die, do you think he would let us go? Li Kuangtu's mouth twitched, and he felt a little embarrassed. He felt that he was offended by Jiang Shangyu, and even felt a little ashamed. He was Li Kuangtu. He was an expert and genius who used to be on par with Wang Tianzong, and even a step ahead of Wang Tianzong at some times. Jiang Shangyu and Li Tianlan were all juniors. Li Kuangtu thought that his status was higher than these young people. His purgatory of heaven capital was also extremely powerful. When did he and his purgatory of heaven capital need to be let go by others? What I said is the truth. Jiang Shangyu said, my feeling tells me that Li Tianlan didn't die, and his body won't even have any problems. Maybe it will be a blessing in disguise. I'm not optimistic about the collision between the purgatory of heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace. The contrast between them is very obvious. The purgatory of heaven capital is not declining, but obviously, Samsara Palace has created opportunities for us to rise in East Island. But after the chaos in Snow Country, Emperor Dong's palace has lost some direction. It has been more than 2 years since the end of the chaos in Snow Country, and people in the purgatory of heaven capital have not seen a relatively clear future. But Emperor Dong's palace is different. It's not declining, but Emperor Dong's palace and Li Tianlan are really like the sun at high noon. After the final battle in Beihai, Emperor Dong's palace will definitely rise. In the Dark World in Zhongzhou State, Kunlun City can't stop it, nor can the Prince Group. Emperor Dong's palace will extend its hand to the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State, set up a new group, and swallow up the vacancy left by the joint forces. Everyone knows what will happen. The embryonic form of a dynasty has become very clear. Jiang Shangyu talked more and more, and his tone gradually became normal. The uneasy silence and calmness slowly dissipated. His stiff body on the sofa moved slightly, and he continued to say, maybe there are some hidden cards, but it's meaningless in front of Emperor Dong's palace. The 12 super masters of Samsara Palace have suffered heavy losses, but the ones left are all experts. Saint is in the Invincible Realm, and Military Counselor is a top half-step Invincible Realm expert. Duke and General also appeared, as well as Horsewoman. The most important thing is Flaming Fire. Mochizuki Song is not dead, and she will also stand on the side of Emperor Dong's palace. Besides, Jiang Shangyu glanced at Li Kuangtu and said, Sidu Zongyue? Obviously, she betrayed us, or in other words, she has long been out of our control. Although there are not many top assassins in Sai City, we have to be careful about each one of them. In addition, there are new rising experts in Emperor Dong's palace, such as Lin Yuxian and Li Beidian. How many people in the Purgatory of Heaven capital dare to say that they can defeat them? Bai Yuming, Su Chu, and Du Hanyin are also not mediocre. More than 2 years ago, Emperor Dong's palace took away a large number of graduates from the 2 academies. Now a considerable number of them have been stuck at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. Perhaps most of them do not have the potential to enter the thunder-shocking realm. Even if a few of them break through the peak of the fire-flaming realm, the strength of Emperor Dong's palace will be greatly enhanced. And Jiang Shangyu's voice was a little erratic. The new batch of students from the 2 academies should be graduating soon, right? Look at what Li Tianlan has done during this time. In the Battle of the Desert, Xinyuan Feng tore apart the Iron Legion with a sword and killed Gu Qianchuan with 1 strike. In Huading, Li Tianlan killed the invincible Realm Killer Ju with 1 strike. In Sai City, he buried tens of thousands of elites of Snow Country with 1 strike. In Kunlun Mountain, he easily injured Gu Xingyun. In Emperor Dong's palace, I also lost the battle with him. In the final battle of Beihai, he killed 2 martial arts Grand Masters of East Island in an instant. There is no doubt that he is the #1 person in the Dark World. After this year's graduation, at least 60% of the students will choose to join Emperor Dong's palace. Do you know what this means? Li Kuangtu did not speak. His face became more and more gloomy. The rise of Emperor Dong's palace is unstoppable. Next, they will completely enter an unimaginable explosive period. Compared with the Purgatory of Heaven capital, they can't compare with Li Tianlan in terms of top combat effectiveness. They can't compare with Li Tianlan in terms of wealth. They don't have a huge support force in Tiannan, but the new group of Emperor Dong's palace can give Emperor Dong endless support. Jiang Shangyu smiled. He seemed to have completely returned to normal. So, we don't have to wait for Li Tianlan to free up his hands, because he has now. The Purgatory of Heaven capital is doomed. Is this the conclusion? Li Kuangtu's voice was extremely cold. This is not a conclusion, it's a fact. Jiang Shangyu said calmly. After a pause, he continued, "Do you want to hear my advice?" "Say it." Li Kuangtu gritted his teeth. "I'll join hands." Jiang Shangyu said, "This time Li Tianlan didn't die and fell into a desperate situation. I may not have a good time, but the only good thing is that my foundation is not in Tiannan, so I still have room to breathe. But this time, the joint forces are destined to suffer heavy losses. After Emperor Dong's palace solved the Purgatory of Heaven capital, they will definitely sweep the whole Dark World, occupy the territory, and swallow up the interests. It's hard for me to escape. But if I join hands, before Li Tianlan officially reaches the level of Wang Tianzong, we at least have room to resist. In this process, we still have some hope if we look for opportunities." Li Kuangtu pondered and did not speak. Ahem, Jiang Shangyu coughed violently without warning. He coughed so violently that snot, tears, and even blood came out of his mouth, nose, and eyes at the same time. Jiang Shangyu staggered up from the sofa, waved his hand at Li Kuangtu, and walked into the bathroom with a stiff body. The violent coughing lasted for a full 5 minutes before it stopped. Jiang Shangyu put his hands on the sink and breathed heavily. He looked at himself in the mirror. Tears, snot, and blood were mixed together. It was an extremely pale face. But he was still alive. It was good to be alive. Jiang Shangyu smiled, bent down, and turned on the faucet. When he bent down to wash his face and hair, did he ever think about what he was doing in the mirror? Was he bending down as well? Or perhaps they were watching silently, without any sadness or joy, or with hostility, mockery, or malicious killing intent. Did he feel a little panic at the moment he bent down? He could not see anything, so he would never know. The blood washed away the tears and blood. Jiang Shangyu exhaled slightly and opened his eyes. He did not have time to straighten up. There seemed to be something extremely sticky and soft on his arm. It was a strand of long black hair that was stuck together by a lot of blood. The long hair spread along his neck to his arm. In the mirror, blood kept gathering on Jiang Shangyu's shoulder. A woman's face with distorted features appeared quietly on his shoulder, looking at him from the mirror. Chapter 1048. Quiet, deep, focused, and peaceful. His consciousness spread endlessly, and his body relaxed as much as possible. It was indescribable comfort and tranquility. Li Tianlan had never thought that he would get to this point so quickly. What did it mean to enter the invincible realm? Li Tianlan himself couldn't figure it out for a while. Both his body and will were perfect, but because there were too many perfections, he formed an imperfection that was difficult to be compatible with. Li Tianlan already had some clues to solve this problem, but it would take time. In his expectation, it would take at least 3 to 5 years for him to have enough confidence to explore slowly when he officially entered the invincible realm. But now, unimaginable energy completely filled his body, constantly repairing it. In meditation, Li Tianlan could even clearly feel the slightest changes in his body. Every drop of blood became hot, every muscle became more energetic, and every cell became more active, and then continued to divide. Great power kept brewing in his body, the dual wind and thunder veins in his body became more and more resilient, and the strength of his body was increasing all the time. The constantly increasing strength of his body made his strength and speed reach the most perfect state of balance. His blood was roaring in his body, and Li Tianlan felt that his body was like a volcano that would erupt at any time, with unimaginable vitality and enough power to destroy everything. His constantly spreading consciousness became more and more sober, and his perception became clearer and clearer. The acuity of his body seemed to suddenly increase countless times. The most intuitive feeling was pain. It was a sharp pain with a little comfort. It was so contradictory, but so clear. The changes inside his body continued. The extremely severe pain, accompanied by a strong sense of suffocation, enveloped Li Tianlan and swallowed all his reason. In the luxurious bedroom, no one disturbed his crucial meditation. Li Tianlan sat on the bed, his body trembling violently in pain. Big drops of cold sweat flowed from all over his body along with black dirt. It was the impurities hidden in the deepest part of his body and the blood left in his body after many serious injuries. The black dirt covered his whole body in the blink of an eye, and the inexplicable pain still continued, spreading all over his body. It was as if every muscle in his body was vibrating and every tendon was twisting crazily. Hot blood was rushing through his body like boiling magma, spreading all over his limbs. Li Tianlan gritted his teeth and closed his eyes to endure it. The breakthrough this time was obviously unusual. The originally long process was compressed countless times under the stimulation of huge energy. Even Li Tianlan found it a little hard to bear when it suddenly broke out. The pain continued and became more and more intense. The muscles and tendons all over his body were twisting as if they were trying their best to achieve the desired state. The blood that looked like eyes flowed through his limbs, into his chest and abdomen, and gathered crazily towards his heart. All the pain seemed to disappear in an instant. Li Tianlan suddenly opened his eyes and fell on the bed in an extremely embarrassing manner. His body twitched wildly, and his expression, which had been trying hard to endure, twisted to the extreme in an instant. An unimaginable itch suddenly broke out from his chest. Li Tianlan had suffered a lot since he was a child that he shouldn't have suffered at his age. His will was tough enough, but the itch that broke out in an instant directly and completely destroyed all his will without warning. It was like a real heart-wrenching pain. His chest seemed to be completely torn open. Every microsecond when the blood rolled in his chest, the tide-like itch was destroying his will. Li Tianlan fell on the bed, his body trembling. He opened his eyes wide and gasped for breath. For a moment, it seemed that all the blood in his body had poured into his chest, and the itch that was enough to drive people completely crazy was spreading in his chest bit by bit. The other parts of his body seemed to have completely lost feeling. Huge energy was in his body. His body was still surging. All the blood poured into his chest. Then, in a very short time, new blood began to burst out from every corner of Li Tianlan's body again, and the extremely hot and almost boiling blood continued to surge toward his chest. The blood in his body was completely sucked out by his chest, and it was sucked out again and again. If the human body was a container, then the blood in the container obviously had a limit. But after countless blood poured into his chest, it was constantly compressed. The infinite energy stimulated Li Tianlan's body to constantly produce blood. The moment the blood appeared in his body, it began to gather in his chest, again and again. Li Tianlan's weight kept increasing. In the roar, the huge, soft and luxurious bed under Li Tianlan collapsed directly. There was more and more blood in his body, almost endless. The blood that was constantly compressed in his chest gradually spread to the right atrium little by little, and it was constantly becoming solid. Bang! The sound of a vigorous heartbeat rang out from the bedroom without any warning. The collapsed bed shook slightly. The heartbeat was getting stronger and stronger. Bang! The whole bedroom was shaking slightly with the heartbeat. Bang! The huge heartbeat kept shaking gently and rhythmically. Li Tianlan opened his eyes wide. His consciousness had long been in a trance, and he didn't even know where he was or what he was doing. The will that was broken by the itch was hard to reorganize. In a trance, Li Tianlan saw fragments of his life one after another. That was the purest martial arts. He picked up the sword blade for the first time. He punched for the first time. His body rose into the air for the first time. He meditated for the first time. He entered the chi-controlling realm for the first time. He broke through to the thunder-shocking realm for the first time in a fierce battle. He recultivated for the first time. He killed for the first time. He destroyed for the first time. Yes, destroyed. Countless pictures flashed in Li Tianlan's widened eyes. His pupils were slightly unfocused, and all the rotating pictures were slightly frozen in an instant. In the picture, it was Li Tianlan who was only 7 or 8 years old. His clothes were thin, and he had no weapon in his hand. His eyes were so determined. He punched, rushed forward, and attacked. All the movements were frozen at that moment. The world seemed to freeze. His fist fell on a thick tree in front of him. In the frozen picture, the young Li Tianlan was motionless. However, the tree was falling apart bit by bit at an extremely slow speed, as if it was moving in slow motion. The trunk was tearing and disintegrating, the leaves were flying, and the smoke and dust were all over the sky, tearing, destroying, and destroying. The extremely loud heartbeat was getting clearer and clearer, and it even rushed out of the bedroom and echoed in the corridor on the top floor of Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan's eyes were empty. The frozen picture continued to turn. Next, there were swords after swords, countless sword lights. It was the 24 moves of sword, his own kendo, and the foundation of all his martial arts. His kendo had long been perfect. But what was the meaning of the so-called perfection of a flawless kendo? Tearing, destroying, and destroying. The foundation of his dance was collapsing at an unprecedented speed, being torn apart, destroyed, and destroyed. There was nothing left. This seemed to be everything he had been pursuing. What he pursued was not martial arts. But the kind that could tear everything and destroy everything, what was it? Li Tianlan suddenly found that he couldn't find a suitable adjective in his days. What could tear everything? What could destroy everything? Martial arts? No, it was not martial arts. Realm? No, it was not realm either. Then what was it? Li Tianlan's consciousness was constantly in a trance, and he became a little anxious. What could tear everything? What? A word that seemed very familiar to him but also very strange to him was hovering on the edge of his consciousness, but he couldn't think of it. His martial arts foundation was completely destroyed. But now he was stronger than ever before. He didn't need martial arts, realm, or even weapons. He didn't need anything, but he could destroy everything. It wasn't that he needed anything. He didn't know what state he was in now, but he could tear something if he wanted to. Yes, it was not martial arts or realm. He couldn't think of what it was. He just could do it. All martial arts and sword lights were torn apart bit by bit. The itch began to weaken gradually. The blood that was compressed again and again in his body had been compressed into a substance, and it was slowly gathering in the right atrium. The huge energy was gradually consumed, and the energy in Li Tianlan's body finally turned into blood that filled his limbs, and then disappeared completely. The last drop of solid blood in his chest gathered in the right atrium and turned into a small mass. A film-like substance covered the small mass of blood. The blood trembled slightly. The heartbeat continued, and the sound resounded over Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan's consciousness gradually returned. His eyes were empty. It was like everything had returned to the beginning, the original end and also the final starting point. What's going on? The extremely stable heartbeat was getting louder and louder like thunder, almost covering the entire sky over Emperor Dong's palace. More and more people walked out of the castle and looked up at the direction of the top floor of the castle on the fountain square in front of the castle gate. The violent heartbeat kept beating. Qin Weibai stood at the forefront of the crowd and whispered to herself, "Good thing." Xianyuan Wuxiang smiled, and his eyes became more and more friendly and peaceful. From now on, Big Brother is on the most correct path, a path that belongs to him. Everything has just begun. Just begun? Qin Weibai turned her head and looked at Xianyuan Wuxiang. After the breakthrough, Li Tianlan was already in the invincible realm. Before he broke through, he was already the top one in the dark world. How terrifying Li Tianlan was now was absolutely beyond imagination. All this was just the beginning? This is close to the starting point. Xianyuan Wuxiang whispered, "It's also close to the end." He suddenly smiled and whispered, "Listen to the heartbeat." Bang! The heartbeat was beating. Qin Weibai was about to say something. Bang! Another heartbeat that was completely different from the previous one rang out. In the huge bedroom, Li Tianlan lay on the bed. The constantly vibrating blood in the right atrium seemed to have gathered enough power with incomparably strong vitality. It stopped trembling for a moment, and then slightly pulsed. Boom! It was like a real thunder. All the windows in the entire Emperor Dong's palace were completely shattered in an instant under the heartbeat. The huge heartbeat, with incomparably majestic power, swept through the entire Emperor Dong's palace in an instant like a storm. Glass shards filled the sky and danced in the air. In the chaotic crowd, Xianyuan Wuxiang quietly raised his head and smiled. His body was extremely relaxed, and he smiled gently, saying, "Welcome back." Chapter 1049. The sudden and huge sound waves swept through the entire Emperor Dong's palace in an instant. Countless pieces of glass shattered under the impact of the sound waves. They flew into the sky and fell quickly. The bright sunlight shone on the pieces of glass. Countless rays of light refracted and were colorful. The whole world seemed to become extremely illusory at this moment. The huge heartbeat was still beating, and the frequency was gradually increasing. The huge sound waves disappeared, but the beating heartbeat became more and more obvious. It was hard to describe the first heartbeat. It was like a heart that had been silent for countless years and finally regained its vitality after almost an eternity. It slowly pulsed for the first time, and then endless vitality began to recover. The heartbeat beat again and again. At this moment, the heartbeat of everyone in Emperor Dong's palace was beating in sync with the heartbeat that had just recovered. The speed of the heartbeat was too slow. In just a few seconds, most people's faces were already pale. Fortunately, the recovery of the heartbeat was also speeding up. About 10 seconds later, the extremely slow heartbeat finally returned to a normal level. Then, the heartbeat that everyone could hear completely disappeared. Qin Weibai breathed a sigh of relief and put down her hand that was pressed against her chest. Her face was pale, but her eyes were extremely calm when she looked at Xianyuan Wuxiang. She didn't know what was going on, but all the signs showed that Xianyuan Wuxiang knew what was going on. "It's okay." Xianyuan Wuxiang felt Qin Weibai's gaze. He turned to look at her and said with a smile, "Big Brother broke through, and it was a very successful breakthrough. Everything was very smooth, and there was no deviation at all. It was the most incredible breakthrough." Incredible? Qin Weibai frowned. "You said it's incredible that Tianlan broke through and entered the invincible realm? It's very common to break through and enter the so-called invincible realm, but this time it's not so simple." Xianyuan Wuxiang smiled and said, I'm a doctor. Qin Weibai subconsciously curled her lips. She might have always been a quiet and cold goddess, and she might have a very feminine side, but that was a scenery that only Li Tianlan could see. Now, she curled her lips, which was really rare. Everyone around who saw this scene felt dizzy. Xianyuan Wushang was also stunned. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Go on. Qin Weibai said. She didn't know if it was true that Xianyuan Wushang was a doctor, but even if it was true, this so-called doctor was completely different from ordinary doctors. I told you, I'm a doctor. Xianyuan Wushang smiled bitterly and said, that's why I'm very sensitive to the changes in life force. The most important thing about this breakthrough isn't that Big Brother's strength has become stronger. To be exact, it's that his life level has changed with this breakthrough. Based on the current scientific level, we can understand this as evolution. Although it's not actually the case, the word evolution is the closest to Big Brother's current situation. Qin Weibai was lost in thought and did not speak for a while. Xianyuan Wushang smiled and continued, let's go see him. He's just made a breakthrough, so it's inevitable that he's not used to it yet. He'll need to adapt to many things in the coming days. Qin Weibai nodded subconsciously and trotted to the entrance of the castle without hesitation. Xianyuan Wushang stood in place, his head lowered as he thought about something. He didn't say anything for a while. Young master. A deep and heavy voice suddenly rang out. Xianyuan Wushang's body was suddenly shrouded by a shadow. Xing Tian appeared beside him and looked down at him. Xianyuan Wushang raised his eyebrows slightly and said, Why are you back so soon? Did you suffer a loss? Originally, he had asked Xing Tian to entertain Lin Shi, who had just arrived. Apart from anything else, it was necessary to show the 11th prince of the war god realm his power and let him understand whose territory he was in. But Xing Tian had returned so soon, and Li Tianlan was here. Would Lin Shi dare to attack Xing Tian? Xing Tian shook his head and said, I didn't find him. Xianyuan Wushang's chubby face showed an expression that said, You're kidding me, and said, You said you didn't find him? He asked in disbelief. The natives of Miracle City didn't notice Lin Shi's arrival, but how could he and Xing Tian not notice it? Not finding him under such circumstances was like a person with excellent eyesight looking at the light in front of him in the dark and saying that he couldn't see the light. You couldn't find him? Or you didn't dare to go? Coward! Why are you acting like a coward? What are you doing? Xianyuan Wushang lowered his voice and said, gnashing his teeth. Xing Tian explained in a low, muffled voice, I'm lost. Xianyuan Wushang was furious. You're lost, you're King lost. Xing Tian's voice continued, I should have entered the Qingqing territory and been deceived. You? Xianyuan Wushang's voice was suddenly stuck in his throat and he coughed violently. Qingqing territory? His face turned red and he looked at Xing Tian to confirm. Yes. Xing Tian nodded. Qingqing territory was a symbolic deception area. The whole time corridor was focused on Feng Qingwu. Xing Tian entered the Qingqing territory, which meant Lin Shi should have been warned. Even if Feng Qingwu is not in Miracle City, her eyes are obviously on Miracle City now. Xing Tian said in a low voice. Xianyuan Wushang was stunned for a while and shook his head. He wanted to say something but didn't dare to. Feng Qingwu, Lin Shi, tut. Xianyuan Wushang couldn't help but say, is it necessary? How much hatred do you have? Princess Royal Feng Qingwu, who was good at deception, didn't have an obvious advantage when facing the peak experts of Order and Shadow compared to the other neutral peak experts. Because she wasn't good at one-on-one combat, she was at a disadvantage when facing some special individuals. This wasn't an area that was good at one-on-one combat, but it was an area that was extremely good at head-on combat. It seemed that Feng Qingwu was the only one who had reached the peak of this field in the entire time corridor. As for the Human Emperor Palace and the War God Realm, there was no one. The Time Corridor and the Human Emperor Palace of the War God Realm were unlikely to have any interaction, but they would eventually have contact. To be precise, the existence of Feng Qingwu was a super killer weapon to deter the human race. But this killer weapon took the initiative to show Lin Shi his power. He didn't know if the 11th prince was scared out of his wits. Should he go and comfort him and express the great humanist concern of the space-time corridor? Tisk, it's so difficult. Xinyuan Wushang scratched his head and laughed awkwardly. Xing Tian glanced at him and then looked away. He naturally knew why. It was said that when Xinyuan Wushang entered the war god realm for the first time, he had been shown his power. Perhaps this scene made the 9th prince feel like he had vented his anger? Xing Tian thought silently. 1 second later, his huge body suddenly shook, and he suddenly looked up at the sky of Emperor Dong's palace. Xinyuan Wushang had turned around a second earlier than Xing Tian. Their eyes were focused on the gate of Emperor Dong's palace at the same time. Silently, a blurry figure stepped on the gate of Emperor Dong's palace, looking at the magnificent castle in the sun. Xinyuan Wushang and Xing Tian saw him. Obviously, he also saw Xinyuan Wushang and Xing Tian. It seemed that he didn't expect someone to find him. He raised his eyebrows in surprise and whispered to himself, "Interesting." His voice, which sounded like he was talking to himself, spread through the whole Emperor Dong's palace. Wang Xingxiao's voice was a little playful. "How did you find me?" With the Chosen One's sword energy and the sword energy coat formed by Worryless, although Wang Xingxiao was not in the invincible realm, the resonance of the sword energy of the same origin allowed him to exert strength close to Wang Tianzong's. He had every reason to believe that in the whole Emperor Dong's palace, even if he stood in front of Situ Zongyuan's saint, they could not find him. But now, this inexplicable fatty? This silly big guy? Wang Xingxiao was a little confused. Who are these two people? The information of the Wang family of Beihai was completely blank. Wang Xingxiao, Xinyuan Wushang frowned tightly. His eyes stayed on the sword energy coat beside Wang Xingxiao for a long time. "What are you doing here?" Unconsciously, Xinyuan Wushang's voice had become extremely serious. It was not an excuse or a joke that he could not fight here. Although it was not absolute, it was also a fact. His profession was a doctor. Miracle City was a real environment, and his combat capability would be compressed to the extreme. The remaining combat capability, even if he exerted all his strength, was at most at the level of the invincible realm. Moreover, he was not at the peak of the invincible realm, but at the level of the fake invincible realm who barely broke through to the invincible realm and was not even qualified to be on the divine and holy lists. If he really exerted all his strength, Xinyuan Wushang could do it, but the consequences were not what he was willing to bear. But now, Wang Xingxiao was surrounded by sword energy, and his aura was so strong that it had even surpassed that of Li Tianlan before the breakthrough. Worryless energy was perfectly blending with Wang Tianzong's sword energy. In this state, Wang Xingxiao could absolutely be said to be one of the most terrifying experts in the dark world, or even the best. Xinyuan Wushang's combat capability was really like an ant. The other party's appearance here suddenly gave off a feeling that he was not friendly. He subconsciously glanced at Xing Tian beside him. Xing Tian silently took a step forward and stood in front of Xinyuan Wushang. "Where is Li Tenglan?" Wang Xingxiao suddenly asked. Absolute power gave him enough confidence. His entire spirit, qi, and spirit were completely different from the day before. His tone of voice also changed slightly. "Let him come see me." Xinyuan Wushang tilted his head slightly and asked in confusion, "Do you have any misunderstanding about your identity? You want to challenge my big brother now that you have some strength?" "Your big brother? Li Tianlan?" Wang Xingxiao was stunned and then he laughed. "Don't get me wrong, I don't mean to challenge him. I just want to borrow something from Emperor Dong's palace." His voice spread around Emperor Dong's palace, bringing waves of echoes. "What thing?" Xinyuan Wushang's voice was a little cold. "Xinyuan Feng." Wang Xingxiao's tone was calm and firm, as if he was making a declaration. "I suddenly find that the Wang family of Beihai is more suitable to have Xinyuan Feng than Emperor Dong's palace." Chapter 1050. Wang Xingxiao didn't stay idle at all. His trip to take Xinyuan Feng definitely touched Li Tianlan's sore spot. He wasn't very clear about Li Tianlan's state, and everything was just speculation. With his current combat capability, he didn't need to be afraid of anything. But Emperor Dong's palace was Li Tianlan's territory after all. If he delayed, things might change. Countless words had been echoing in his mind as soon as he entered Tun. Wang Xingshiao didn't want any accidents. He just took the things and left. That was the only thing he wanted to do. So although he stood motionless on the gate of Emperor Dong's palace, countless sword energy had densely covered every corner of Emperor Dong's palace. The sword energy shuttled and explored, looking for Xianyuan Feng, which had no energy and looked like a piece of ordinary iron. It was not easy, but now Wang Xingxiao's sword energy was so abundant that he could use it unscrupulously and support him in countless battles. Therefore, there was more and more sword energy around him, and the search became more and more detailed. The sword energy swept over the square of Emperor Dong's palace and was about to rush into the castle. Xing Tian, who was tall and burly like a giant, made people think that he was born with divine power, suddenly took a step forward. Wang Xingxiao's eyebrows twitched slightly for a moment. There was no information about Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian in the Wang family of Beihai's information. But judging from where they stood in the crowd, their identities were obviously not trivial. They stood in front of everyone. This position might not mean everything, but at least it meant that their status in Emperor Dong's palace was not low at all. But the Wang family of Beihai didn't notice it? Wang Xingxiao didn't know what it meant. When facing these two people, he was instinctively vigilant. In his sight, Xing Tian suddenly stretched out his palm. His palm was as big and thick as his body. Wang Xingxiao's spirit tightened for a moment. But the expected attack didn't come. In his sight, the wide palm grasped the air and suddenly pulled. With Xing Tian as the center, the space within several meters suddenly twisted and deformed. A large amount of invisible and vast sword energy in Emperor Dong's palace suddenly stopped when it was about to rush into the castle. The infinite sword energy seemed to hit a wall and couldn't move an inch. Xing Tian took another step forward. The distorted space quickly changed in his hands and finally stabilized. Wang Xingxiao was stunned. Everyone was stunned. It wasn't a sword, a cold weapon, or a firearm. The distorted space was compressed and formed in Xing Tian's hand. It was like a pen. It was like a real brush, a transparent, illusory, yet incomparably exquisite brush. The brush in Xing Tian's hand had an indescribable sense of incongruity. Such a huge body, such an exquisite brush. Wang Xingxiao smiled subconsciously. The expressionless Xing Tian swept his brush forward, and the soft and transparent tip of the brush suddenly drew a dazzling line in the air. The lines rose and fell. Before anyone could react, Xing Tian had put down the second stroke. Then came the third. A majestic painting scroll was instantly imprinted in the void. Drawing in the void. Heaven Splitter painting. Without any warning, a loud explosion suddenly exploded in everyone's ears. In an instant, the painting that Xing Tian had branded into the void became extremely realistic. This was the simplest painting. The content of the painting was just a seemingly bare mountain peak, but the aura of this mountain was incomparably majestic and domineering. It seemed real and illusory. The mountain peak seemed to have appeared for a moment, but it also seemed that it had never appeared. The space was still being torn. All the sword energy between heaven and earth suddenly went out of control. The dense sword radiance flashed and rushed directly into the mountain peak in Xing Tian's painting. In the blink of an eye, the sword energy released by Wang Xingxiao had been swept away. No stop. For anyone in the time and space corridor, once the battle started, there was no possibility of stopping. Miracle City looked backward, but it was extremely beautiful and harmonious. Last night, in the bloody battle with the Holy Disarmament Corps in East Island, Beihai was full of artillery fire, and several cities were in a mess and blood flowed like rivers. All of this looked so gentle in the eyes of Xing Tian and Xianyuan Wushang. It might be cruel, but in their eyes, it was really very gentle. Compared with the purgatory where they had to struggle wildly to survive, even the war here seemed so beautiful. The tip of the brush vibrated in the void. Xing Tian suddenly waved his hand, and the painting scroll that had absorbed countless sword energy disappeared instantly. The moment he put down the brush again, a blood-red and somewhat shocking word, "kill," had appeared in the void. As soon as the word fell, Wang Xingxiao, who hadn't come back to his senses, suddenly realized that something was wrong. At this moment, the whole world seemed to be full of malice. Everything between heaven and earth that he could touch had a sharp edge. Every gust of wind and every trace of air was destroying the inside of his body as he breathed. What was this? What was this? Wang Xingxiao felt it was incredible. The sword energy coat that enveloped him flew gently and wrapped Wang Xingxiao tightly in an instant. Wang Xingxiao's eyes were extremely cold. He had never seen such a fighting style, or even heard of it. But now he was different from before. He didn't have to fear anyone anymore. He was determined to get Xinyuan Feng. Now that he had encountered some unexpected enemies, Wang Xingxiao didn't mind making the scene bigger. On the gate of Emperor Dong's palace, Wang Xingxiao straightened his body. In an instant, the monstrous sword energy burst out with an extremely violent momentum. There was no brewing process. The sky above Emperor Dong's palace became completely blurred. Huge arcs of light that connected heaven and earth appeared in every corner of Emperor Dong's palace. That was the extremely condensed sword light, with a sharpness that could tear everything apart. The arcs of light kept splitting within the range of Emperor Dong's palace, and more arcs of light rushed toward Xingtian. Xingtian kept waving his hand that held the brush and wrote the word, suppress, in the blink of an eye. When the last stroke fell, all the suppress characters spread rapidly and filled the sky and earth. But it still didn't work. Xinyuan Wushang narrowed his eyes and sighed softly. The image of Xingtian holding the brush might be a little strange, but compared with the domineering figure who pulled the bow in East Island, this was his strongest state. Xingtian was a calligrapher. However, in the current environment, it was impossible for him to stop Wang Xingxiao with his ability. Countless suppress characters flew in the air. Wang Xingxiao raised his eyebrows and took a step forward. Crack! The extremely violent sword energy grew almost limitlessly. Countless suppress characters were suddenly torn apart by the infinite sword light. Wang Xingxiao's figure had already appeared in front of Xingtian. Wang Xingxiao's sword energy coat kept flying in the air, and a halo of sword energy appeared around him one after another. The brush in Xingtian's hand was directly shattered by the flash of sword energy. The next second, his huge body was directly blown away by the surging sword energy and smashed into the castle. The ocean-like sword energy completely poured into the castle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wang Xingxiao raised his eyebrows slightly and took a step forward. He had already appeared in the bedroom on the 6th floor of the castle. Li Dunlan sat on the edge of the bed, staring at him blankly. Qin Weibai's eyes were extremely cold. She looked at Wang Xingxiao as if she was facing a formidable enemy. Take. As soon as Wang Xingxiao opened his mouth, the sword energy coat that enveloped him suddenly became extremely excited. It didn't give Wang Xingxiao time to speak at all. It lifted the coat and turned into a beam of dazzling sharpness. The whole coat instantly left Wang Xingxiao's body and rushed to Li Tianlun. Wait! Wang Xingxiao's expression changed dramatically. But before his voice died away, the sharpness that the coat turned into had rushed to Li Tianlun and pierced his heart in an instant. Wang Xingxiao's expression changed dramatically. On the bed in the bedroom, Li Tianlun looked down at the beam of sharpness that pierced his heart in a daze. After a long silence, he blinked his eyes. What do you mean? He looked at Wang Xingxiao and asked flatly. Chapter 1051. It's over. The moment the hidden coat of sword energy pierced Li Tianlan's chest, Wang Xingxiao's heart sank to the bottom. It had nothing to do with whether he wanted to or not. In terms of form, Li Tianlan must not die. Wang Xingxiao did not intend to kill Li Tianlan. The Wang family of Beihai, which had just experienced the decisive battle in Beihai, was also in a weak period. At this time, the Wang family of Beihai still needed to stand on the same side as Emperor Dong's palace to face all aspects, especially the pressure from Zhongzhou state. The honeymoon period of the cooperation between the two sides had ended after the final battle, and they were destined to be opponents for most of the time in the future. But neither Li Tianlan nor Wang Xingxiao wanted to completely destroy the other. It was not that they couldn't do it, but the situation didn't allow it. If either side collapsed, the butcher's knife inside Zhongzhou state would fall on the head of the surviving side as soon as possible. This might be a stalemate, but it was also a stalemate that could allow the situation to develop smoothly. Before Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai had a way to break the stalemate, or to be exact, before Wang Tianzong fully recovered and Li Tianlan really broke through and became the heavenly sun, the stalemate would continue. No matter how fierce the two sides fought in daily life, they had to be united in the face of Zhongzhou state. This was also the reason why Wang Xingxiao dared to come. He dared not say that he could defeat Li Tianlan, but he was not too afraid of Li Tianlan. He speculated that Li Tianlan was seriously injured, so he came to take Xianyuan Feng. Because of the delicate relationship between the two, even if Xianyuan Feng fell into the hands of the Wang family of Beihai, Li Tianlan would not really go against the Wang family of Beihai. He might do that himself. But today's Emperor Dong's palace was no longer barefooted and penniless. They had put on shoes now. Emperor Dong's palace was big, which undoubtedly meant great strength and power, but it was also Li Tianlan's responsibility. He would find a way to get Xianyuan Feng back, but everything he did was within the rules. If he dragged it on for a few years, when Xianyuan Feng and Wuxia were fully integrated and fully charged, it would be up to Wang Xingxiao to destroy Emperor Dong's palace. But now, Wang Xingxiao's purpose was extremely pure. He just wanted to capture Xianyuan Feng. He didn't want to kill anyone, let alone Li Tianlan. But the coat of sword energy, which combined carefree energy and Wang Tianzong's sword energy, went completely mad when it saw Xianyuan Feng on Li Tianlan's body. Wang Tianzong's consciousness had fallen silent. Worryless unleashed all of her energy. Even with the suppression of the sword qi, she would be able to regain some of her freedom in a short period of time. She could clearly feel Xianyuan Feng's weakness. Perhaps it was not just weakness. For substances like them, not having any energy was equivalent to being infinitely close to death. Xianyuan Feng had run out of energy. Therefore, without any hesitation, Wuxia rushed to Li Tianlan with his sword energy. The weak but extremely condensed edge easily tore the black windbreaker formed by Xianyuan Feng, and then mercilessly pierced into Li Tianlan's heart. Xianyuan Feng Wuxia wanted it. As for Li Tianlan, if he could get rid of the threat, he would do it without hesitation. The raging sword energy suddenly exploded in Li Tianlan's heart. Intense pain spread throughout his body. Li Tianlan could clearly feel that his heart was completely torn by the sword energy, but his body was still extremely numb. After experiencing the crazy pain and itch during the breakthrough, even if that feeling had disappeared physiologically, it was still deeply rooted in his mind. His body was a little numb, and he was at a loss. He was at a loss about the changes in his body, about the complete shattering of all his martial arts knowledge in the process of the breakthrough, and about many things. So when the energy edge pierced into his chest, Li Tianlan didn't feel much pain. The sword energy tore his heart and lungs. More energy spread out in the fastest time, trying to completely wrap the black windbreaker that Xianyuan Feng had transformed into. Worryless was so excited that the pure energy edge was trembling nonstop. But for Li Tianlan, Worryless had nothing. In his perception, Worryless' excitement was full of malice. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and finally raised his head. His eyes fell on Wang Xingxiao, and he was still at a loss. But no matter how confused he was, he could not recognize Wang Xingxiao. This breakthrough did destroy a lot of things for him, but it was just a breakthrough, not amnesia. Even if Li Tianlan was at a loss, his mind was always clear. What do you mean? Wang Xingxiao clearly heard Li Tianlan's voice. It was a somewhat doubtful voice. But in his ears, it was an extremely tough question. Are you okay? Wang Xingxiao, who saw the sword energy coat piercing Li Tianlan's heart, suddenly felt his heart sink. He even felt that he was dreaming. The chosen one was invincible. Everyone was a human after all. Everyone had a heart. That was everyone's vital point. His heart was pierced. It was self-evident what this result meant. But Li Tianlan, the moment the edge pierced his heart, Li Tianlan's aura suddenly fell to the bottom, but soon became strong again. How could this be possible? The last radiance of the setting sun? Or, Li Tianlan laughed. His face suddenly became as pale as paper. Not only his face, but also his hands and even his neck, all the exposed skin became pale in the blink of an eye, as if all the blood had been sucked out. But his aura was getting stronger and stronger. Wang Xianxia seemed to understand something and seemed to agree with the idea of the last radiance of the setting sun. He suddenly wanted to laugh. The young Dong Huang. The invincible Dong Huang who had just ended the final battle in Beihai. Dong Huang, who was supposed to create a dynasty, died in his own bedroom in his own headquarters? This is not my intention. I just want to take Xianyuan phone. Wang Xianxiao smiled bitterly. He even began to think about the situation after Li Tianlan's death. I believe you. Li Tianlan nodded with a calm expression. You don't dare to kill me. If I die, the Wang family of Beihai will not survive. That's your position. Li Tianlan said calmly, but I'm different. I can kill you. If you die, there's still Wang Tianzong, Summer Solstice, and Wang Xiaoyao. For Emperor Dong's palace, I'm indispensable. But for the Wang family of Beihai, you are not indispensable. Wang Xianxiao narrowed his eyes and quickly calmed down. You can't kill me, he said in a calm tone. Li Tianlan looked at him and said nothing. He let the beam of sharpness nail into his heart. His exposed skin became whiter and whiter, without any color of blood. Anything else you want to say? Wang Xianxiao said with some pity. If you have any instructions, I'll deal with it at my discretion. Li Tianlan lowered his head. Wuyo's energy had almost completely enveloped Xianyuan Feng. In this state, Ruthless had no ability to resist. No need. Li Tianlan said softly. His skin was as pale as paper, but his aura suddenly became extremely strong. Ruthless noticed the change at once. It pierced into Li Tianlan's heart. The infinite sword energy had been raging inside his heart. His heart had long been broken. But at this moment, Li Tianlan's broken heart suddenly began to tremble. The incredibly surging sword energy suddenly appeared. Bang! A thunderous heartbeat suddenly sounded in Li Tianlan's body. Heart, Wang Xianxiao's pupils suddenly contracted. He could hear it clearly. This heartbeat was different from the others. But the most different thing was that this heartbeat came from Li Tianlan. The right atrium of his heart. What was this? A second heart. Yes, it was a second heart. Li Tianlan couldn't explain it. The second heart was the biggest change that had occurred to his body after his breakthrough. The so-called specialty of his hometown that Xianyuan Wushang had given him contained an incomparably rich and abundant energy. Like a vast ocean, the enormous energy stimulated all the functions of his body. His body kept producing new blood. The blood roared, boiled, and gathered in his chest. It was like a whirlpool, condensing all the blood. During this process, there was no more blood in his body except his chest. However, the abundant energy endlessly strengthened the hematopoietic function in his body. So the blood was produced again, and then it was sucked out by the whirlpool in his chest again, and again, and again. The endless blood condensed into a substance and finally formed a new heart in his right chest. This heart was very, very small, but every time it pulsed, it required a tremendous amount of energy. Li Tianlan's original heart was broken by Wuyo. Feeling the crisis of survival, the right heart almost sucked out the blood in his body again in an instant and slowly pulsed for a moment. Infinite power suddenly burst out, stimulating the incomparably rich vitality of the dragon vein. Wuyo's sharpness was completely pushed out, and the broken heart began to heal. The abundant blood began to rush and roar in his body with the pulse of the second heart. Almost instinctively, Wuyo began to retreat and fell on Wang Xianxiao again. A small part of the energy it left in Xianyuan Feng was completely absorbed by the black trench coat. In an instant, the golden patterns on the black trench coat began to light up. Li Tianlan slowly got up, and the surging power cheered in every cell in his body. Li Tianlan paused for a moment. At this moment, he suddenly didn't know how to make a move. His understanding of martial arts was completely shattered in the breakthrough. The swordsmanship that used to be so handy became extremely strange to him. He thought for a second. Then he raised his palm to Wang Xingxiao stiffly. Sword energy? Power? Domain? Or something else? It was an indescribable feeling. Following the direction of his hand, the space in the bedroom instantly collapsed. The coat of sword energy enveloped Wang Xingxiao at the same time. Before Wang Xingxiao could react, his whole body was directly pushed up by the incomparably huge force and flew backward like a cannonball. Li Tianlan frowned slightly. The force of this blow fell on Wang Xingxiao. If Wang Xingxiao smashed into the wall like this, the whole castle would probably need a major repair. He pressed his outstretched palm slightly. Buzz. The wall of Emperor Dong's palace instantly became extremely illusory. Wang Xingxiao's body went directly through the wall and was slapped outside the castle. Wang Xingxiao was stunned. Li Tianlan himself was a little stunned. The two of them had the same idea. What the hell is this? Li Tianlan didn't know. At this moment, he only knew that he wanted to do it and he could do it, so he did it. What the hell is this? Li Tianlan's figure flashed slightly, and his whole body appeared directly outside the castle. Like a cannonball, Wang Xingxiao was blasted out of the castle. His body landed steadily on the ground and slid on the ground for a distance of dozens of meters. The coat of sword energy completely wrapped his body. An extremely powerful aura was boiling on Wang Xingxiao's body. Wang Xingxiao, who was extremely shocked, seemed to have calmed down. He raised his head and looked expressionlessly at Li Tianlan, who was floating in the air. The two of them looked at each other slightly. I've told you, you can't kill me. His figure slowly rose into the air, and the sword energy roared and surged around him. Wang Xingxiao laughed and said, I'll play with you today. Chapter 1052. For a long time, Wang Xingxiao's image in Li Tianlan's heart had been relatively vague. The so-called vague did not mean that it was unclear, but that it had many faces. More importantly, the two of them were actually not familiar with each other. In Li Tianlan's heart, Wang Xingxiao was a very tough person. He also looked very gentle, but he was not easy to compromise. He was also a very persistent and firm person. The young generation of Zhongzhou state before Li Tianlan appeared was the era of Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan. At that time, Wang Xingxiao was low-key, calm, and calm. The young generation of Zhongzhou state after Li Tianlan appeared was the era of Li Tianlan. Everyone watched Li Tianlan leave everyone, including Wang Xingxiao, far behind. The youngest combat capability of the Invincible Realm. His opponents were the famous Invincible Realm experts in the Dark World. They were the symbols on the divine and holy lists, Li Kuangtu and Wang Tianzong. Wang Xingxiao changed from a leader to a chaser. He still stayed still and silently chased after Li Tianlan. He was surpassed by Li Tianlan. He was surpassed by Jiang Shangyu. Gu Hanshan, who used to be as famous as Wang Tianzong, had already fallen at a speed that was enough to stun people. Even if the young master of Kunlun City was a genius with the heavenly king heart, Gu Hanshan did not make any progress in the nearly 3 years since he was defeated by Li Tianlan in the maneuver of the two academies. Instead, his realm regressed. What about Wang Xingxiao? He was still making progress silently. His mentality was not affected at all. He was stable, peaceful, and persistent. He cultivated his own martial arts and silently carried the entire Wang family of Beihai on his shoulders. In the past 2 years, except for the extremely tough declaration of war on the stage of Formidable Person, Wang Xingxiao had never made any radical remarks to the outside world. Under Wang Xingxiao's command, the various forces inside Beihai had a sense of propriety. They were tough when they needed to be tough, and they gave in when they needed to give in. The Wang family of Beihai had indeed lost a lot of things in the past 2 years, but what everyone saw was that Wang Xingxiao had kept more things. In this state, Wang Xingxiao could easily remind people of the young Wang Tianzong. He was calm, steady, low-key, and silent. He looked at the whole world, but he never paid too much attention to any of his opponents or friends. He focused all his attention on the things that were worthy of his attention. He would not be angry when he was surpassed, nor would he be depressed when he was hit. He was like a high-strength spring. No matter how much pressure he was under, as long as there was a chance, he would immediately bounce back to his original shape, or even bounce higher and further. Li Tianlan looked at Wang Xingxiao silently. Wang Xingxiao's smile was weak and faint. He was not high-spirited or arrogant, but at this moment he stood in front of Li Tianlan with indescribable confidence. The sword energy coat danced on him. The majestic sword energy flew and whistled, and the sharpness all over the sky was hidden. Wang Shengxiao stood motionless in the air, but there was an extremely condensed power slightly fluctuating with his breathing. The current you is a little interesting, Li Tianlan said calmly. He had officially entered the invincible realm. In other words, Li Tianlan didn't know whether he had entered the invincible realm, but there was no doubt that he had successfully broken through to a new level. The combat capability of the invincible realm had entered a new level. If it was not the invincible realm, what was it? There was a flash of confusion in Li Tianlan's eyes, and then he shook his head. After the breakthrough, he became extremely sensitive to all kinds of energy. The vague sword energy coat on Wang Xingxiao's body had a clear outline in his eyes. At a glance, he could roughly understand what was going on with Wang Xingxiao's state. Such a Wang Xingxiao, he was very difficult and tricky to deal with. Li Tianlan was almost sure that if he hadn't successfully broken through, he wouldn't have been a match for Wang Xingxiao. Wang Xingxiao's realm remained the same, but he had a magic weapon in his hand. The so-called magic weapon was Wang Tianzong's sword intent and sword energy, and it was the energy of Wuxia. This was the same reason that Li Tianlan could effortlessly sweep through the dark world when ruthless energy was abundant, or even more than that. If he hadn't successfully broken through, the current situation would have been a little embarrassing. Even now, Li Tianlan felt a little difficult to deal with. But it was also very interesting. This is Tianen, Li Tianlan said calmly. So? Wang Xingxiao raised his eyebrows slightly. Do you want to get out of here, or do you want me to ask you to get out? Li Tianlan asked. Wang Xingxiao was stunned and then he laughed. Obviously, he didn't expect Li Tianlan to say that. His smile was full of surprise. This is not your character. Li Tianlan might not be very familiar with Wang Xingxiao. But as a pursuer, it was impossible for Wang Xingxiao not to study Li Tianlan. What was Li Tianlan's character? It was the simplest. He came to Emperor Dong's palace from Beihai and even made a move, breaking into his bedroom. He wanted to rob Ruthless, and Wuxia even pierced his heart. Under normal circumstances, Li Tianlan would never let it go like this. But now it sounded like, as long as he left Tianan, everything would be fine. Are you in a bad state now? You need to adjust, or? Wang Xingxiao said thoughtfully, speculating the reason for Li Tianlan's concession. In his view, this was Li Tianlan's concession. I need to think. Li Tianlan frowned. You're not leaving? From Beihai to Tianan, Wang Xingxiao sighed softly. I really came from afar. I came for Xinyuan Feng. You know very well. Before the final battle broke out, you knew very well that this is the key to Beihai's future foothold. Li Tianlan didn't wait for him to finish. He simply nodded and said slowly, if you don't leave. He raised his palm hesitantly again, but his voice was extremely firm. Then don't leave. Boom! The world suddenly shook. Colorful sword light burst out of Li Tianlan's palm in an instant. The messy light flew around, and Li Tianlan's figure appeared directly in front of Wang Xingxiao. He punched. Li Tianlan's figure became completely blurred. After the breakthrough, his speed became faster. As he moved, Li Tianlan's body completely pulled out dozens of residual shadows. A large number of residual shadows had not disappeared, and the sound of countless punches and kicks had suddenly sounded. In the next second, the colorful sword light, which broke out first but arrived a step later than Li Tianlan, completely drowned the two figures in it. The sky above Emperor Dong's palace was full of colorful sword light. In the messy light and shadow, the two figures directly collided in the most direct way. Two different kinds of sword energy madly entangled and fought, and the incomparably loud dragon roar echoed in the sky. In an instant, one of the figures directly turned into fragments all over the sky. A large number of fragments turned into streams of light. The The streams of light turned into Wang Xingxiao one after another. The sword energy kept fluctuating, and the moment countless Wang Xingxiao appeared, they merged into one again. A crisp and cold sword chime abruptly rang out between heaven and earth. High in the sky, Li Tianlan's eyes slightly narrowed. A snow-white stream of light had appeared in Wang Xingxiao's hand. The light was extremely heavy, but so flexible. Firmament. This was the giant sword that Wang Xingxiao had been using since he was a child. The giant sword, which was almost taller than Wang Xingxiao, was directly pulled out of the sword energy coat. The moment the light shone, the sword with absolute explosive power had directly crossed the space and reached in front of Li Tianlan. Wang Dao's sword. The sword edge kept trembling, destroying everything and moving forward. This was a kind of truly invincible momentum, unparalleled in the world, crushing everything. The extremely condensed sword energy and energy vibrated wildly. Wang Xingxiao's figure was no longer blurred. The sword energy coat covering his body was exposed in front of everyone, and his clothes were completely flying. Wang Xingxiao's eyes were cold, and his aura was rising almost endlessly and crazily. Sword energy, sword intent, sword momentum, everything reached the peak in an instant. Outbreak. It was the most thorough and continuous outbreak without any reservation. The sword light went completely out of control. Heaven and earth kept shattering in the sword light. They turned into giant swords that covered the sky one after another. There was no order. Countless phantoms of giant swords appeared in front of Li Tianlan in an instant, as if they were crazy. Wang Dao's sword was completely formed. Without any hesitation, Wang Xingxiao, who continued to break out, suddenly raised the sword. The sword momentum changed. Overbearing sword. Fierce, crazy, unreasonable, and murderous intense sword into the sky. The monstrous sword light swept everything, and countless sword lights turned into Wang Xingxiao one after another. Every Wang Xingxiao appeared next to the giant sword phantoms of Wang Dao's sword. Attack, attack, attack. Without any pause, countless Wang Xingxiao and countless giant swords attacked Li Tianlan at the same time. He did not retreat. Li Tianlan's body stiffened for a moment. The rainbow-colored sword light quickly retracted. The next second, everyone heard a sharp sound that seemed to tear the world apart. Li Tianlan seemed to have turned into an extremely pure sword light in an instant. All the way forward, penetrating everything. The colorful sword light streaked across the sky with a long streamline. It shattered, and disappeared. Wherever the sword light passed, the giant sword phantoms and Wang Xingxiao were torn into extremely messy sword energy at the same time. Li Tianlan, who had turned into a sword light, kept accelerating, getting faster and faster. A large number of giant swords disappeared almost at the same time. The sword light moved forward. It kept moving forward. It was tough, resolute, decisive, and ruthless. The shining sword light almost broke the attack of Wang Dao's sword and overbearing sword in an instant and appeared in front of Wang Xingxiao. Wang Xingxiao did not retreat either. The huge sword edge in the sky vibrated, and his figure instantly became illusory. The sword energy coat, which had become completely obvious, completely wrapped his body again. Wang Xingxiao held the hilt with both hands. In the blink of an eye, he also turned into a sword light. Rush forward. No compromise, no retreat. Indomitable forward, the extreme outbreak. The surging sword light and energy burned almost endlessly, rushing to the colorful light in the sky. Heavenly sword. Chapter 1053. The two beams of sword light approached each other with the same determination and strength. Heaven and earth had become completely chaotic at this moment. Colorful and dazzling, Li Tianlan, who had turned into a sword, moved from top to bottom. Everywhere he passed, the sky and the earth were filled with all kinds of light. It was incomparably bright and incomparably fierce. Every color and every ray of light was a different sword energy, majestic and chaotic, but perfectly integrated together. Countless sword intents turned into the purest sword light. This was no longer the 24 moves of sword. At this moment, This light was the purest swordsmanship. The colorful light kept refracting. Wang Xianxia, however, rushed up from below. Blurred. Everything was blurred. It was a blurry and chaotic state. It was neither resplendent nor gorgeous. It was like a transparent flame that burned everything in its surroundings. His body rushed up. With his original combat power as the center, everything completely evaporated in the blurred light and shadow. The blurred sword light, which seemed to be able to burn everything, continued to accelerate and burst out. The air, space, and even the colorful sword light in all directions were all burned into nothingness. The surging colorful light spread again and completely covered all the buildings in Emperor Dong's palace. The moment the sword energy covered Emperor Dong's palace, the two beams of light, one above and one below, collided with each other in an extremely fierce manner. It was not the loud sound of gold and iron colliding. The moment the sword light collided, there was a dull sound like a fist hitting a fist. Breaking, boiling, chaotic, and erupting. The incomparably sharp, colorful sword light directly tore the transparent flame that seemed to be able to burn everything at the moment of contact. The flame-like sword light shot out in all directions in an extremely messy manner. The sword energy went completely wild with unimaginable destructive power. In the incomparably bright and shining light, Li Tianlan's palm suddenly turned over. The invisible shock wave of their collision shattered the space and swept toward all the buildings and people in Emperor Dong's palace. The next second, the colorful light that covered the entire Emperor Dong's palace suddenly lit up. Few people could notice this momentary change. But the few thundershocking realm experts in Emperor Dong's palace were keenly aware of all this. In the crowd, the military counselor's pupils suddenly contracted for a moment. The seemingly endless colorful sword light covered the entire Emperor Dong's palace, including everyone, every tree, every blade of grass, and every drop of water. It was soft, tough, and peaceful. The transparent sword light that was torn apart by Li Tianlan flew wildly. For ordinary people, the aftermath was absolutely destructive. The impact of the collision between the two spread everywhere. The messy, transparent sword light and the shock wave swept through the entire Emperor Dong's palace in an instant, including everyone in the Emperor Dong's palace. The shining, colorful sword light fluctuated slightly, and a large number of colorful ripples suddenly appeared in the air. However, nothing in the entire Emperor Dong's palace was damaged or changed by the shock wave. This was definitely not something that sword chi could do. Sword chi and sword intent that focused on attacking could indeed play a protective role at times, but it could not be so perfect. As Li Tianlan turned his hand, the colorful sword light that covered the entire Emperor Dong's palace suddenly became a domain. And it was an incomparably perfect and pure domain. Everyone was a little confused, including Li Tianlan himself. Li Tianlan didn't know why it was like this. He just felt that he could do it, but he didn't know why. In the crowd, only Xianyuan Wuxiang and Xing Tian watched all this silently and didn't speak. They didn't recognize the so-called four realms of martial arts in Miracle City at all. The chi-controlling, ice-condensing, fire-flaming, thunder-shocking realm sounded like it, but in fact, it was specious. As for the invincible realm, it was even more ridiculous. The division between sword chi and domain was completely correct, but also completely wrong. Different ways of thinking would touch different truths, and all cognition would inevitably be limited. Domain, sword chi, everything was actually the most basic thing, energy. Pure energy. Different changes of energy would have different manifestations, such as sword chi and domain. But in essence, it was the same. It was energy. The so-called martial arts, and even higher levels, different paths, all had a more accurate adjective. Xianyuan Wuxiang knew that Li Tianlan would be confused, but he didn't dare to say and couldn't say the words that could only be perceived by Li Tianlan himself. Authority. Xianyuan Wuxiang watched quietly. The completely transparent but burning sword light was broken into countless pieces, flying messily over Emperor Dong's palace. The dense sword light turned into a domain in the blink of an eye. Li Tianlan paused for a moment. Without hesitation. In the twinkling of an eye, The completely messy transparent sword light suddenly changed. The deceiving Taoist sword. Wang Xiangxiao's figure was completely invisible. The entire space of Emperor Dong's palace seemed to be completely burning, blurring. The messy flying transparent sword qi and the burning space had completely merged into one, and it was difficult to distinguish them from each other. Wang Xiangxiao completely completed the most perfect concealment while retreating. The sword light surged violently. The burning space was also surging. Heaven and earth seemed to be moving, but also seemed to be completely different. Li Tianlan, who was surrounded by the colorful sword light, suddenly tightened his body. The sword light was like a tide, spreading in an instant, mighty and mighty. In an instant, the completely violent but illusory transparent sword light rushed toward Li Tianlan from all kinds of weird and tricky angles. Front and back, left and right, up and down. Endless attacks came from every unimaginable angle. It was hard to predict and impossible to guard against. The essence of Beihai's swordsmanship was indeed an outbreak. The swordsmanship of Beihai emphasized momentum, but it didn't mean that their swordsmanship didn't have corresponding changes and dexterity. As a super family that had represented the pinnacle of swordsmanship in the Dark World for hundreds of years, Beihai's swordsmanship itself was flawless. The deceitful Taoist sword sounded like only one move, but it was the pinnacle of the swordsmanship skills of the Wang family of Beihai. It was unpredictable and peerlessly bizarre, like a violent storm that was impossible to guard against. The sword light surged and vibrated. The colorful sword light held up for a moment with Li Tianlan as the center and turned into a colorful halo. The halo was completely torn apart by the transparent sword energy in an instant. The absolutely abundant energy tore apart Li Tianlan's sword energy defense, and countless attacks fell on Xin Yuanfeng's black windbreaker in an instant. Aggressive and oppressive, Wang Xiangxiao, who had enough strength to support him, seemed to be a completely different person. He was strong, determined, and decisive. His every move and every sword strike carried a touch of madness that was no less than Li Tianlan's. The indistinct sword light instantly brought about an incomparably violent storm. The transparent sword light kept flying and shuttling around the whole Emperor Dong's palace, with distinct layers and more tricky angles of attack. The sword energy cut through the windbreaker, hair, and face. Li Tianlan's face was directly cut by the sword energy, leaving a shocking wound. Blood flowed out. The wound healed instantly. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly, and the colorful sword light around him suddenly turned. The colorful light that covered the whole Emperor Dong's palace instantly shrank toward Li Tianlan. The light swept everything, and all the transparent sword light shuttling from all directions was swept and pressed toward Li Tianlan in an instant. The sword light completely turned into a domain. The domain that contained all the transparent sword light shrank completely, and the whole battlefield was shrunk in an instant. Wang Xiangxiao might not be a threat, but his current situation was a little tricky. His sword energy and Wang Tianzong's were of the same origin, which was the result of being influenced since childhood. During the half a year on the stage of Formidable Person, Wang Xiangxiao would be completely baptized by Wang Tianzong's sword energy every night. Now Wang Xiangxiao's sword intent and Wang Tianzong's sword energy were almost completely compatible, and Worryless energy was the strongest catalyst and fusing agent. It merged with Wang Tianzong's sword energy and became a coat that covered Wang Xiangxiao. In this state, fighting with Wang Xiangxiao was equivalent to fighting with Wang Tianzong directly. After all, as the energy core, Worryless could completely bear the sword energy of the Chosen One. It was even more suitable as a pure energy body than Xin Yuanfeng. The sword energy of the father and son was infinitely compatible, but after all, it was not completely compatible. Even so, Wang Xiangxiao's real combat capability at this time had reached the real peak, and he was only half a step away from Wang Tianzong in the period of Mormons. Before Wang Xiangxiao's sword energy and Worryless energy were used up, he was almost equal to the Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou state before the final breakthrough after fighting with tribulation. This state was undoubtedly stronger than Li Tianlan's state before the breakthrough. Li Tianlan had just broken through and needed to familiarize himself with it, while Wang Xingxiao could continue to make his sword intent and Wang Tianzong's sword energy more compatible. What did this mean? It meant that as long as worryless energy was not used up, it could always replenish Wang Tianzong's sword energy. Then, when Wang Xingxiao's sword intent and Wang Tianzong's sword energy were completely compatible, Wang Xingxiao could fully exert Wang Tianzong's peak strength when he was in Mormons. In other words, this was the true strength of a supreme heavens chosen. Wang Xingxiao's path was completely clear from today on. He only needed to make his sword intent fit Wang Tianzong. There was no bottleneck, and the road in front of him could directly reach that supreme level. Li Tianlan's sword intent had been perfect, and there was no bottleneck. As long as he had time, he could also reach the supreme level. What both sides needed was time. Who would be faster? This step meant too many things. It was not only the advance and retreat between Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai, but also the life and death between Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai. Even Li Tianlan himself did not expect that an opponent he had left far behind would force him to the point where he could only race against time overnight. This was the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai, but it was also because of Wang Xingxiao's personal talent and efforts. This step between the two was extremely important. But it was not important. Realizing this, Li Tianlan was more determined. Wang Xingxiao might not have wanted to kill him at first, because of the delicate relationship between Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai. But this so-called delicate relationship, no matter who took that step first, would be completely broken. In this case, what was the point of maintaining it now? Wang Xingxiao might have concerns. But Li Tianlan, who had broken through to the invincible realm and really stood on the threshold of the Chosen One, had no concerns. Kill! Such a Wang Xingxiao, such a deceitful Taoist sword, if it were in the past, it would be difficult for him to deal with. But the moment the sword energy turned into the domain, everything became clear. Li Tianlan's eyes suddenly became sharp, and the colorful light gathering toward him from all directions became brighter and brighter. The domain kept shrinking, and the battlefield between the two shrank rapidly. Countless transparent sword chi were particularly bright in the domain that was completely covered by the colorful light, and a large number of sword lights were being forced to gather. 1, 2, 3, countless sword lights gathered together in the domain that was constantly shrinking. Sword of Emperor Path. There was no thinking or hesitation at all. The moment when all the sword lights were about to gather, the sword momentum of the deceitful Taoist sword instantly changed. Wang Xingxiao's figure reappeared, and the huge sword edge of firmament had already pierced Li Tianlan's chest. It was really unimaginably determined and strong. Wang Xingxiao's sword intent had been changing, smart, determined, decisive, and confident. He had always followed Li Tianlan's fighting rhythm and never fell behind. Sword of Emperor Path. Sovereign Descent. Li Tianlan had also studied this. One sword. Among the 6 paths of reincarnation of the Wang family of Beihai, this was the simplest sword. It was also the sword that looked the most similar to Sword of Emperor Path, but it was different. It could even be said that they were completely different. Sword of Emperor Path emphasized momentum, but Sword of Emperor Path sought simplicity. The simplest straight stab, the strongest explosion, the shortest distance, and the fastest speed. The simplest ones were often the ones that had been tempered thousands of times. The huge sword edge of firmament flashed with cold light. The sword and the figure instantly became extremely clear, simple, and ordinary. The sword edge went straight. Every time this seemingly simple sword trembled, it carried with it an extremely heavy sharpness and killing intent. This sword couldn't be avoided. Even Li Tianlan couldn't avoid it. The sword edge tore the air, crossed the distance, and the moment the heavy sword tip was fixed on the black windbreaker, Li Tianlan stretched out his hands. He put his hands together, and the sword light shone. A strong and violent force burst out from Li Tianlan's hands. There was a sudden wild sound between heaven and earth. Blood gushed from Li Tianlan's hands, and the huge and heavy sword edge of firmament suddenly broke into 2 pieces. The moment the blood beads and the sword edge shone in the air, Wang Xingxiao let go of the sword hilt, put his fingers together like a sword, and pointed directly at Li Tianlan. The distance between the two narrowed in an instant. Wang Xianxia had been attacking. He not only kept up with Li Tianlan's rhythm, but also tried to suppress Li Tianlan's rhythm. Li Tianlan had never experienced such a feeling in his life, except in the practice with Li Honghe. Wang Xiangxiao's fingers even became completely transparent at this moment. The mighty sword energy gathered at his fingertips, with extreme power and speed. His sword intent was of the same origin as Wang Tianzong's. At this time, the sword energy on him was supreme. Worryless energy was extremely abundant. Even in terms of his own physique, Wang Xiangxiao also had the innate wind and thunder veins. Wang Xiangxiao had never been bad. Even though Li Tianlan had risen so fast, Wang Xiangxiao, who had always kept a low profile, had always been regarded as one of the top experts of the younger generation. Now, with the appearance of the sword energy coat, all his shortcomings seemed to be completely made up. His own physique, his own vision, his own fighting art, everything seemed to be completely perfect. There was no firmament in his hands, but at this time, this sword was the closest to perfection. The holy sword. Calm, majestic, deep, and lofty. The sword energy and sword intent merged. The sword intent merged with the sword light. The sword light merged with the energy, and the energy merged with the sword energy. In an instant, Wang Xiangxiao's whole body became a sharp light that seemed to be able to split the world. The distance between the two was too close. The moment the sharp light rose, the irresistible sword intent of the holy sword appeared directly in front of Li Tianlan. At such a close distance, Li Tianlan punched Wang Xiangxiao's arm hard without hesitation. Their arms collided fiercely, and the sword energy soared into the sky. The second before the holy sword was about to explode, Wang Xiangxiao, who had his fingers together like a sword, suddenly loosened his palm. His palm slightly deviated under Li Tianlan's fist, but in an instant he stretched forward and suddenly grabbed Li Tianlan's clothes. Li Tianlan's clothes? What were Li Tianlan's clothes now? It was ruthless. It was Xian Yuan Feng, who had just absorbed a small part of worryless energy but had not recovered yet. Wang Xiangxiao had never forgotten his purpose. Li Tianlan was very strong, completely stronger than he had expected. In Wang Xiangxiao's estimation, Li Tianlan's combat capability should be weaker than it was now. He came to Tianan to take Xian Yuan Feng because he had speculated that Li Tianlan was very likely to be seriously injured, but he had also been prepared for Li Tianlan not to be injured. He thought that his current strength should be stronger than Li Tianlan's. But when he saw Li Tianlan, he knew that it was not the case at all. Not to mention anything else, Wang Xiangxiao could not figure out Li Tianlan's second heart. He had thought that his strength was already stronger than Li Tianlan's. As long as worryless merged with ruthless, he would not have to worry about Emperor Dong's palace in the future. Even if Wang Tianzong could not recover in the next few years, with the combination of worryless and ruthless, the Wang family of Beihai would have the peak combat capability. Or if Wang Tianzong's injury recovered, or if his sword intent and his father's sword energy were perfectly integrated, then there was no need to be afraid of Li Tianlan. He felt that he was stronger than Li Tianlan, and the speed of merging sword energy should be faster. It would not be too late to deal with Emperor Dong's palace then. But now, Li Tianlan? He seemed to have broken through? The two seemed to have stood at the same starting point and looked at the same end. Li Tianlan had the intention to kill Wang Xiangxiao. When Wang Xiangxiao realized this, how could he not have the intention to kill Li Tianlan? But no matter what, his main target was still Wu Qing. If he could get ruthless today, the battle with Li Tianlan might not have to happen today. He suddenly grabbed Li Tianlan's collar with his outstretched hand. The moment the mighty sword energy suddenly broke out, Wang Xiangxiao suddenly raised his head. In his sight, he saw Li Tianlan's extremely calm and indifferent face. Calm, resolute, and calm. He did not retreat, give way, dodge, or avoid. Li Tianlan raised his palm. A strong uneasiness instantly enveloped Wang Xiangxiao. There was no hesitation, no time to think. He suddenly loosened his grip on Xian Yuan Feng's collar. The incomparably majestic sword light suddenly broke out in his hand, burning everything. Wang Xiangxiao's whole body seemed to be completely burning at this moment. 6 Paths of Reincarnation Sword. Chapter 1054. There was no transition. The stalemate in everyone's eyes seemed to be completely broken in the blink of an eye. Sword light filled the sky above Emperor Dong's palace. The moment Li Tianlan and Wang Xingxiao got closer, Wang Xingxiao loosened his grip on Xin Yuanfeng's collar. With unprecedented determination and madness, Wang Xingxiao completely burst out all his sword energy and energy. It was a kind of determination to die if he couldn't win. Staking everything on one throw was the most extreme madness. He was risking his life. It didn't matter whether the situation had reached this point or not. What mattered was that Wang Xingxiao didn't retreat at all. Burning. Breaking out. Without hesitation. Sword of 6 Paths of Reincarnation. The most powerful unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, the peak of martial arts of the Wang family of Beihai, the intertwining sword intent suddenly burst out in Wang Xingxiao's hands. Light and shadow intertwined. A deafening buzz suddenly rang out in the chaotic and blurry world. The empty air, the messy light, the violent airflow, and everything in the world seemed to have sharp edges at this moment. They were sharp, radiating in all directions, yet surging with unparalleled power. Wang Xingxiao's body didn't change, but the moment the endless sword energy burned around him, his figure seemed to expand endlessly, occupying the whole Emperor Dong's palace and the whole world. In a trance, Wang Xingxiao's open palm instantly closed. Forward punch. The distance between him and Li Tianlan was too close. The distance between their palms was even closer. Just a few centimeters away, the fist with all the sword energy and energy burst smashed over, and the space between them suddenly broke. Wang Xingxiao's fist hit Li Tianlan's palm hard. The sword energy roared. Sword of 6 Paths of Reincarnation was the combination of the 6 moves of the Wang family of Beihai. The abundant sword energy and energy supported Wang Xingxiao's physical strength and will, and the sword energy kept blooming. The unparalleled sword of King Path. The extremely complicated and simple sword of Emperor Path. The indomitable sword of Dominating Wei. The extremely weird sword of Mysterious Wei. The irresistible sword of Heavenly Path. The majestic and peaceful sword of Holy Path. The sword energy rotated and grew endlessly. The buzzing sound of the sword energy between heaven and earth had instantly turned into an ear-piercing howl. The two figures, entangled in sword chi, collided wildly and rose rapidly into the sky. The sword chi became more and more violent. All the sword light left the ground of Emperor Dong's palace at the same time and bloomed in the air. 7 colored sword lights filled the sky. The sky was constantly being devoured by the burning sword chi. Chaos, whistling, and collision. The sky was filled with dazzling brilliance that shot through the air without restraint. Who will win? On the ground, 2 voices rang out almost at the same time. One was gentle while the other was heavy. Military advisor. Xing Tian. As soon as the words left their mouths, they were stunned at the same time and subconsciously looked at each other. Isn't that obvious? The same 2 voices gave the same answer at the same time. All of them sounded extremely confident. Qin Weibai and Xianyuan Wushang froze at the same time and looked at each other. Military counselor stood beside Qin Weibai. Xing Tian stood beside Xianyuan Wushang. However, the distance between them was not far, so the 4 of them looked like they were standing together. The exact same question, the exact same answer. Qin Weibai might have been blindly confident, but Xianyuan Wushang was reasonable. Xing Tian hesitated and wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. He couldn't say that he had completely seen through Li Tianlan's breakthrough, but at least he had some understanding. Strictly speaking, Li Tianlan's breakthrough could not be regarded as a breakthrough in martial arts, but it could not be said that it was not. To be precise, Li Tianlan's breakthrough was from the power level of Miracle City to another angle, an angle of the power level of space-time corridor. This was undoubtedly a very obvious and absolutely strong transformation. However, because of the lack of a lot of information, Li Tianlan was now in a state of uncertainty. This state greatly limited Li Tianlan's performance. Obviously, he was not in his peak state. In this case, Li Tianlan's strength had naturally improved compared to before the breakthrough, but there were too many things that he needed to explore and was not clear about. So for now, this kind of combat strength improvement was actually relatively limited. This was the problem of upper and lower limits. If the upper limit of Li Tianlan after the breakthrough was 10, then in this state, Li Tianlan was probably standing at the end of the lower limit. It might be 3, 2, or even 1. The key to this reason was the lack of information. Wang Xianxia, on the other hand, was completely different. He also had a lack of information, but he didn't know about it at all, so he didn't have any doubts in his heart. Whether Wang Tianzong's path was correct or not, at least he had reached a certain limit and end. The sword qi controlled worryless energy, and Wang Xianxia controlled the sword qi. Wang Xianxia might not have broken through, but in this complete state, his realm was equivalent to infinitely close to that supreme realm. In this respect, his realm was higher than Li Tianlan, who had just entered the invincible realm. You think so? You're exaggerating. As if knowing what Xing Tian was thinking, Xinyuan Wuxiang said calmly, Wang Xingxiao's realm is very high, but how high can it be? He has his own foundation. It's not so much that his realm is high, but that the sword qi and Wuyo's realm are high. Now he looks perfect, but there are gaps in the combination and utilization of each other. So strictly speaking, even if Wang Xingxiao's current realm is higher than his brother's, it's not much higher. No matter when has my brother ever lost a battle with someone at the same level or slightly higher than him? The so-called stalemate right now is all fake. Fake? Qin Weibai looked at Xinyuan Wuxiang and asked. My brother didn't do his best. Xinyuan Wuxiang laughed. Tianlan is not a person who will hide his strength. Qin Weibai shook her head. Look around. Xinyuan Wuxiang said. They looked around at the same time. They were surrounded by the grass and trees of Emperor Dong's palace. In the extremely fierce and even destructive battle, Emperor Dong's palace was still intact. Although it could not be said to be unscathed, the damage was almost negligible. In their line of sight, wisps of colorful sword light were shining from everywhere. As Li Tianlan and Wang Xianxia rose into the air, they rushed into the sky at the same time. Not doing his best was not hiding his strength. It was because Li Tianlan had put some of his attention elsewhere during the battle. After the battlefield left Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlan was really unscrupulous. Qin Weibai looked up at the sky. Everyone looked up at the sky at the same time. Xinyuan Wuxiang watched quietly and suddenly said, It's very interesting, he said softly. Xing Tian and military counselor asked at the same time. In the sky. Xinyuan Wuxiang said. Qin Weibai's brows furrowed slightly. The sun hung high in the sky above them. The sunlight covering the earth looked extremely blurry in the spreading sword light. The transparent burning sword energy was getting more and more violent. Wang Xianxiao continued to break out. His aura kept rising, and he became crazier and more terrifying. The extremely dazzling seven-colored sword light was still shining. It was colorful. The battle might be extremely fierce. But the scene looked extremely beautiful and dreamy. Qin Weibai watched quietly. At this moment, she didn't know if it was an illusion, but she seemed to feel that all the light in the colorful sky seemed to dim quietly for a moment. Chapter 1055. Almost no one noticed the abnormality in the sky. Or it could be said that the abnormality was too weak. Emperor Dong's palace was full of colorful lights, protecting all the domains. Countless domains, big and small, began to change the moment Li Tianlan and Wang Xingxiao rushed into the sky. The light turned into pure energy, and the energy turned into sword energy in the shortest time. The sword energy rose into the sky, quietly, faster and faster. The sky was full of dazzling brilliance. The sky was full of bright colors. However, this incomparably resplendent color was gradually becoming more intense. It was a very subtle change, but it was the simplest truth. The darker the sky was, the brighter the light was. What did this mean? Qin Weibai was a little confused. She subconsciously glanced at Xinyuan Wuxiang. Xinyuan Wuxiang kept his head up. Among all the people, perhaps except Li Tianlan, only Xianyuan Wushang and Qin Weibai noticed the change in the sky. Even Wang Xingxiao didn't notice it. All he noticed was that Li Tianlan's sword energy was getting stronger. After leaving the range of Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlan's combat capability almost improved a lot when he was in the air where he couldn't destroy the palace. The situation that seemed to be evenly matched gradually tilted towards one side. The transparent sword light was burning with colorful energy, and the colorful energy turned into sword light to extinguish the flame with a wave of Li Tianlan's hand. Li Tianlan became more and more determined. He let go of his scruples and kept increasing his strength. Sword energy, strength, speed, willpower, everything began to be absolutely concentrated. Wang Xingxiao clearly felt the suppression. This feeling of suppression gradually became more and more obvious, as if it was going to completely swallow him. Li Tianlan still had doubts deep in his eyes. But that confusion gradually began to disappear. In his eyes, Wang Xingxiao saw that he was thinking. It was very obvious. The sword energy roared and flew high in the sky. Wang Xingxiao's figure seemed to be getting bigger and bigger. 6 different kinds of sword energy constantly blended together. Their figures were getting higher and higher. The transparent sword light that burned everything was like a storm high in the sky, constantly expanding and completely enveloping the core of the battlefield. The storm began to shrink. A large piece of colorful sword light was torn apart. The outermost bright light collided with the edge of the storm and formed a stalemate. The center of the storm began to approach the two. Between heaven and earth, every space was filled with incredible sharpness. The scales that had already tipped over seemed to be pushed back bit by bit. This was the first time Wang Xingxiao had used the complete 6 paths of reincarnation sword. With his own realm, without the help of Wang Tianzong's sword energy, he couldn't even use the complete holy sword, let alone the 6 paths of reincarnation sword. 6 paths of reincarnation sword. He was very familiar, but also very unfamiliar. Therefore, there was still a gap in the most extreme eruption. However, with the improvement of his combat capability, even if there was a gap in his 6 paths of reincarnation sword, Li Tianlan could do nothing about it. However, Wang Xingxiao also knew this, so he didn't try to make up for the gap. Thus, the sword qi continued to circulate in the sky, and its power continued to increase, gradually approaching the peak of its power. If Wang Tianzong performed this move himself, there would be no process at all. At the moment when the two of them rushed to the sky, the 6 paths of reincarnation sword with the most extreme power would directly explode in the sky. But Wang Xingxiao needed time. This was a big difference, but it wasn't that big of a difference for the current battle. The 6 different sword lights became more condensed and sharp. Li Tianlan's suppression of Wang Xingxiao gradually disappeared. The storm raged high in the sky, and the whole sky seemed to become an extremely vague and transparent huge whirlpool at this moment. The edge of the whirlpool spread outward, but the core kept shrinking. The inner and outer layers. The whole whirlpool gradually formed a natural circle, and every arc of the whirlpool was extremely awe-inspiring. Suppression. At this moment, Wang Xingxiao even vaguely showed signs of suppressing Li Tianlan. More than 2 years. Even in the hundreds of years of the Dark World, if not counting the eternal sword above Mormons that ended Wang Tianzong's life, today's battle could almost be said to be the peak battle in the Dark World for hundreds of years. Wang Xingxiao's attack became more and more violent and domineering. The storm of sword energy whistled and rotated. His voice was calm and dignified. I can give you one last chance. Give me Xianyuan Feng, and I can let you go today. Condescending. This posture was so dignified, but it was so natural. Li Tianlan, who had been thinking about something silently and dealing with Wang Xingxiao's attack, laughed when he heard this. Are you talking to me? Maybe you still don't understand your current situation. Wang Xingxiao's voice was flat and piercingly cold. Maybe you have a new breakthrough now, but you can't block this sword. I can give up the current sword energy and part of Wuyo's energy. But after this sword breaks out, I can only give up these at most, but I won't be hurt. The chance of you escaping unscathed is equal to 0. Do you still want to persist? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly and remained silent. The colorful light all over his body kept flying. Countless rays of light began to slow down and become sticky. The sky seemed to become darker. 6 paths of reincarnation is nothing more than this, Li Tianlan said blandly. Wang Xiangxiao's eyes suddenly became sharp for a moment. In that case, go to hell. Crack, an extremely clear sound suddenly rang out in the sky. Sword of Wang Dao, sword of deceit, sword of hegemony, sword of emperor path, sword of heavenly path, and sword of holy path. The 6 sword chis seemed to have completely merged together in the incomparably huge storm vortex. Wang Xiangxiao suddenly straightened his body. The sword energy of the chosen one burned wildly, and Wuyo's energy began to pour out without reservation. The huge vortex of sword energy seemed to be completely still at this moment. It was not static. The vortex was rotating so fast that it looked like it was motionless. Boom! The loud noise was earth-shattering. It exploded. The monstrous sword energy completely exploded at this moment. The indescribable sharpness swept across the air in an unstoppable manner. Space, airflow, sword light, and sharpness went forward. Everything was silently annihilated. The colorful sword light was swallowed and disintegrated at a speed visible to the naked eye. There was no room for resistance. The blazing sword light continued to expand, growing and multiplying endlessly, ceaselessly reincarnating without end. The burning sword light occupied the sky. The colorful light was getting less and less. 6 paths of reincarnation. This was the pinnacle of the Wang family of Beihai's swordsmanship for hundreds of years. It was also the pinnacle of the Dark World's swordsmanship for hundreds of years. In terms of swordsmanship, even the Li family's 24 moves of sword seemed to be a little less sharp than 6 paths of reincarnation. Today's Wang Xiangxiao was infinitely close to perfection. This move of 6 paths of reincarnation was also infinitely close to perfection. The sword light was mighty above the sky. Wang Xiangxiao, whose aura instantly became weak, watched the colorful sword light being swallowed by the burning sword energy and Li Tianlan being completely shrouded by the endless sword light. "Do you regret it?" he said in a hoarse voice. "Xianyuan Feng is still mine." Li Tianlan raised his palm. The sword light seemed to be completely swallowing him in the next second. His voice resounded between heaven and earth. "I still have one move. Are you afraid?" "What?" Wang Xiangxiao sneered. Li Tianlan's voice sounded with boundless coldness, calm and indifferent. Break of reincarnation. 24 moves of sword, break of reincarnation. The last move of 24 moves of sword was also an unfinished move. It was also the move that the war god used to restrain 6 paths of reincarnation. This move was not complete in the Li family. It was not complete in the Lin clan either. But this move was complete in the sky, very complete. Whoosh! An extremely sharp whistling sound suddenly rang out in the sky. All the colorful sword light did not disappear, nor was it swallowed. All the sword light completely changed the situation in an instant. The dazzling 7-colored light completely disappeared. All the sword light suddenly turned pure black. It was black, not dark. The pure and extreme black sword light suddenly burst out with Li Tianlan as the center. It was mighty, like a black ocean. The surging black ocean completely broke the sword energy storm of 6 paths of reincarnation. Li Tianlan's figure turned into every drop of water in the black ocean. Every drop of water also turned into Li Tianlan. The ocean surged and destroyed everything. Li Tianlan's figure appeared directly beside Wang Xiangxiao. His fingertips, which were condensed with thick black color, slowly touched Wang Xiangxiao's sword energy coat. Boom! In the loud bang, the sword energy coat on Wang Xiangxiao suddenly burst into pieces. Countless energy and sword energy became completely scattered. Chapter 1056. No words could describe Wang Xiangxiao's feelings at this moment. Shock, astonishment, disbelief, despair, and a myriad of other emotions that even he couldn't describe. The dazzling seven-colored sword light that shone in the sky turned into the purest black in an instant. The darkness surged and spread out. At this moment, it was as if a black ocean had suddenly appeared in the sky. It was vast and mighty, but extremely quiet. It was like eternal silence and coldness. This was the purest black. It rose and fell between heaven and earth, and even the shadows were completely contained in it. The sword energy was like the sea, tearing the sky, the sword light, and the burning flame. Li Tianlan's figure was everywhere. He was infinitely close to Wang Xingxiao, but infinitely far away. His whole person seemed to have completely become this black ocean, and he could appear in any corner at will. His fingertips touched Wang Xingxiao's sword energy coat. It was neither fast nor slow, but it was impossible to dodge. The sword energy that had completely turned black appeared in front of Wang Xingxiao, occupying his whole world. It was the ultimate shattering and destruction. Heaven and earth withered, and everything turned into ashes. Nothing could continue to exist in this kind of sharpness. This sword seemed to be incomplete in Li Tianlan's hands, but it was already the most complete sword move. 24 moves of sword, break of reincarnation. Everything was forcibly suppressed. It was even completely crushed in an instant. The 6 paths of reincarnation sword, which Wang Xingxiao was not very familiar with, had countless flaws in this black ocean. The black ocean wrapped all the light and rushed forward. The 6 seemingly perfect and endless sword energy were suddenly completely torn into individuals. Li Tianlan's finger touched Wang Xingxiao's chest. Worryless energy and Wang Tianzong's sword energy were constantly turbulent, fragmented, and quickly separated. He lost. The ending was so clear. The sword energy coat clinging to his body was constantly broken. In the surging sword light, Li Tianlan's aura suddenly weakened, but Wang Xingxiao's aura almost fell to the bottom in an instant. The surging black ocean occupied the sky, blocking everyone's sight. The boundless black sword energy tore Wang Xingxiao's sword energy coat. Li Tianlan's eyes were firm and sharp. Broken reincarnation. This was not a sudden flash of inspiration that allowed him to complete this move of the absolute sword. Instead, it was a vague thought. It was not until he really converged all the light and the black sword chi was completely formed that he could be sure that the vague sword chi he felt in the sky above Mount Dibbing in North Sea was the break of reincarnation. He tried to imitate it, but it was completely beyond his abilities. Even though he had broken through again and obtained the second one, this heart was still unable to imitate even 1/10,000th of that sword's charm. However, in that instant of imitation, he still managed to grasp some things in the end. These things became inspirations and ideas, constantly shining in his heart at the moment of his breakthrough. This time, Li Tianlan stopped imitating. Under the circumstances where his abilities allowed it, he tried to use this sword. Compared with the sword in the sky, the power of this sword seemed to be countless times weaker, but it was just what Li Tianlan could bear. This sword directly tore apart the most imperfect part of Wang Xingxiao's 6 paths of reincarnation. The outcome had been decided. With victory and defeat, there would be life and death. Li Tianlan did not hesitate. The overwhelming black sword chi shook with a loud bang. The sharp edge spread all over the sky and rushed to the sword chi coat on Wang Xingxiao. That was the armor of the combination of worryless energy and the chosen one's sword chi. Strictly speaking, as long as this coat was not completely destroyed, Wang Xingxiao, wrapped in it, would not be hurt no matter what he faced. For Li Tianlan, today Wang Xingxiao took a shortcut with the help of the foundation of North Sea, but he had become his biggest threat. If he let him go this time, Wang Xingxiao would be more difficult to deal with next time. So, go all out. The black sword light shook wildly, rolling up huge waves in the sea. The darkness continued to spread and absorbed the sunlight. There was only the purest black and a faint light blue on the battlefield. Light blue? Li Tianlan was stunned. He suddenly felt that this scene was a little familiar. Wang Xingxiao was also stunned. Now he had no way to stop Li Tianlan's killing move. After all, he was a little too careless. If he hadn't consumed the sword chi in Kanglin, he might have had the power to fight against Li Tianlan now. But now, At least before returning to Mount Dibbing to replenish his energy and sword chi, he had no way. Li Tianlan could not let him go. So the only thing Wang Xingxiao could do was to wait for death. When his coat was broken, the black sword light would completely crush him into powder. But that faint blue, Wang Xingxiao was sure that it was not his sword chi. He was also sure that it was not Li Tianlan's sword chi. The faint blue appeared so abruptly in the absolute darkness. It seemed to be harmless, but at this moment, both Wang Xingxiao and Li Tianlan felt extremely uncomfortable. Wang Xingxiao was panic-stricken, and Li Tianlan was disgusted. Without a sound, the faint blue color in the darkness suddenly extended and spread. The familiar feeling deepened in an instant. In Li Tianlan's sight, there was only a little blue light extending and becoming a virtual heartbeat. The lines spread rapidly. The lines spread rapidly. The black sword chi still existed. But at this moment, outside the sword chi, everything in the world seemed to become illusory. Outside the sword chi, the sunlight, the white clouds, the air, the wind, everything turned into a string of constantly flowing data. The world became virtual. All the distance disappeared completely. An incomparably blurry virtual figure was constantly outlined in the virtual world, becoming clearer and clearer, more and more real. He appeared in the black sword chi and appeared in front of Wang Xingxiao. What Li Tianlan saw was only the extremely deep and bright eyes in the other party's incomparably solemn eyes. All the virtual lines disappeared completely. The world was completely restored to reality. The figure of the man with double pupils was still a little vague and stood in front of Wang Xingxiao. The black ocean surged and drowned everything. The uninvited guest raised his palm without hesitation. Heaven and earth shook. The world instantly turned into night. The same black. The same sword chi. The moment the man with double pupils raised his hand, he used exactly the same unique skill as Li Tianlan. 24 moves of sword, break of reincarnation. The sword light kept blooming in his hand. At the same time, the man with double pupils pulled Wang Xingxiao. The world became virtual once again. Li Tianlan realized something in an instant. The moment the two black oceans collided, Li Tianlan, whose aura had gradually become weak, raised his palm again. The sword light swirled wildly between heaven and earth. The man with double pupils seemed to have expected it. His figure became more and more illusory without looking back. This is... Wang Xingxiao, who saw this scene clearly, suddenly narrowed his eyes for a moment. The sword light, which seemed to burn everything, burst with a loud bang with Li Tianlan as the center, touching Wang Xingxiao and the man with double pupils. 6 Paths of Reincarnation Sword. Li Tianlan. 6 Paths of Reincarnation Sword. The 6 Paths of Reincarnation Sword that belonged to Li Tianlan. This sentence was so incongruous, but it was so true. Sword of King Path, Sword of Deceitful Path, Sword of Hegemony Path, Sword of Emperor Path, Sword of Heavenly Path, and Sword of Holy Path. The same 6 swords. Different from Wang Xingxiao. The 6 sword lights took shape in an instant, and then suddenly rose to the extreme in the next second. There was no brewing process. In an instant, the extreme broke out. Boom! The incomparably wild sword light tore the black ocean of sword chi in an instant and swept over the figures of the man with double pupils and Wang Xingxiao. The figures of the two had become blurred. The sword light swept over, and their bodies shook for a moment at the same time. The next second, the virtual lines spread quickly. The figures of the two suddenly disappeared. You're tuning in to the Wandering Hero YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.